Do you need this? Can I use this for here? Thank you. My phone is. Forgot to charge it. He's on Zoom.
I think it's Saturday night. Thanks for going.
August 23rd. Oh, he said it's on there.
Yes. Yeah, let me just assign Sylvia, oh, I can't do it here. Can I use your, I need to put her as a co-host. Yeah.
So like my view was from this way. Is that good? Sylvia? You're good. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm ready, sir. Yeah.
All right, we call this meeting to order at 6:06 PM. Call the roll?
Mayor Fahed,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Santin,
Yes.
Councilman Dion,
Yes.
Councilman Lamas,
Yes.
Councilman Perez Crespo.
Here.
There is a quorum present.
All right, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Okay, we highly anticipated day. We are here to talk about Southeast Springs, so we kick it over to a presentation by our city planner, Sylvia Vargas. Take it away, Sylvia.
Good evening. Good evening. Can you hear me? Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. So actually I need. Here. All right. Well, thank you for inviting me back to talk to you. We had a good meeting last time, but I wasn't sure if you were going to have me back. So this is good. My agenda for tonight is very simple. I'm going to give you a short recap of the findings and outcomes from our prior presentation, just to remind everyone and myself of where we landed, and segue into the outcome of that, which is the framework for potential changes. This framework is not the changes. We're not suggesting any language. We're not, fixed on any particular solution. These are just a series of ideas that provide the foundation for framing the changes. Those will come later. And the reason for that is because tonight the purpose is for you to all be able to have a discussion about these ideas, and for us, with your input, to go next week out to the public and have a similar discussion with them. And then we'll come back. We'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of the schedule, but in November and December, with actual language to show you. So with that, I'm going to turn over to my the first segment of my presentation, which is the recap. Very quickly, for anyone who is not super familiar, we are calling this study Activate Southeast Springs. We came up with this little brand, Southeast Springs, because we didn't want to have to say Northwest 36th Street District and Abraham Tract every single time, and it's a little bit more catchy. We begin hopefully to lay the foundation for a branding of this area, which has not really had a lot of identity set. But it is those two districts that you see outlined in this map in green, in the sort of bright green. It's only 5.6% of the city's total land area, but it's a very important 5.6% because it is the largest concentration of non-residential land the city has, and therefore the producer of tax revenue from non-residential uses, which, even though you may have a majority of residential, which generates a lot of tax, non-residential uses actually tend to generate more tax on a per acre basis, right? So for that reason, this area is really important to the city. It also is important because it is a gateway into the city. It is the first thing that you see if you're driving on Northwest 36th Street into the city. And it creates that first impression. And so it's a very important component of the city from that perspective as well. The purpose of this study in that context is to help the city re-envision the future of these two areas and evaluate options to promote their enhancement and their revitalization. That's what we're calling the study, Activate Southeast Springs. The last time that we were here, I presented what we call the snapshot of existing conditions. This is sort of the evaluation that we have been working on for a while to review the assets, the liabilities, the barriers, and the opportunities that exist in the corridor. And some of the topics that we reviewed included the historic land use and development patterns, the regulatory framework, that means both the comprehensive plan and the zoning, and some external regulations that apply in this area as well. We looked at the urban design and mobility, connectivity, and infrastructure of the area. And we also looked at the market that this area exists in, both locally and regionally. And it's kind of interesting that I read a summary of my presentation after, actually I read it not too long ago, but significantly after the presentation, but it kind of suggests or implied that I had tried to make the area look as bad as possible, that has shown only pictures of the bad or talked only about the weaknesses of it, and that there were good things. And I kind of laughed because, you know, the first time I walked that corridor, I don't hang out. I live in South Miami. I don't hang out a lot in Miami Springs, you know, regularly. I come here for my work, and I really enjoy it. But I think that was the first time that I walked that corridor, you know, as an observer. Perhaps I was trying to look at it the way that a tourist would do, staying in a hotel there, trying to, you know, go somewhere, get something to eat, or, you know, see something interesting. And that was my impression, my impressions from that that tour that I took. Yes, it was a little bit of a cloudy day. Could I have gone back and taken the pictures on a sunny day? Yeah, I could do that. I will do that. But I don't think it's going to change my opinion too much. There are good things in the corridor, certainly they are, but we're not here to fix those. We're here to leverage those, and we are here to try and find solutions to the weaknesses. So that's the perspective that we came at this from. And in that context, I mentioned that we looked at the land use patterns. We looked at it from the way that it exists today, the way that it has existed for a long time, because the area hasn't changed that much over a long period of time. So the existing land use mix is pretty stagnant. There is a predominance of lodging uses and commercial land uses. Those are the majority of the corridor, and also in the Abraham Tract. And you can see that just from the map, the area is pretty fragmented in terms of the parcels. There aren't a lot of large parcels. There are a lot of very little parcels. Some of them are in the same ownership, which is a good thing, but many of those little parcels are owned by many different individuals, and that represents a challenge as well. I'm not going to talk about a lot of the other evaluations that we did of different aspects, but just kind of give you a summary. For the Northwest 36th Street District, I mentioned already that very little change has occurred over time, but significantly, even though in 2011 there were zoning changes that were adopted by the city to try to sort of jumpstart redevelopment in that area, very little change has occurred. Now, development always lags a little behind zoning changes in a situation like this. There are places where, there's a very, very high pent-up demand, and if you change the zoning to make it easier, development immediately comes. Heidi and I, we work in another community where that happened. The moment that the code changed, immediately you started seeing those developers coming in because they were at the door. They were the ones who were clamoring for the changes to happen. That is not yet the case here. So what that tells me in looking at the code is that there are significant barriers that even though the purpose was to make it easier, in fact, that aspect was not really effective. With that said, the market study tells us that the time is coming for this area, and so we need to be ready. So some of the things that we discussed before is that we have a lot of different parcel sizes. The larger sites are sort of underutilized relative to what the zoning allows because the change hasn't happened yet. And a lot of the smaller sites have the challenge of having fragmented ownership. So someone coming in and being interested in them has to talk to a lot of different property owners. Most of the existing buildings in this corridor are older. Some of them are really old. The larger percentage of the buildings are over 50 years old. But there are few of them that have any architectural significance. Some of them have architectural interest from their time, but not necessarily historical significance. With that said, there's always something that you can do with history. And I'll get to that a little bit later. But I do think that the older buildings that do have some architectural interest do not really take advantage of those positive architectural features to do something with. Many of the buildings have a poor interface with the street. They're giving their back to the street even when originally they may have had windows. They have closed them up. You have long stretches of blank wall. The sidewalks, we know, are not very pedestrian friendly. That's not necessarily the building's fault, but the evolution of Northwest 36th Street becoming a major thoroughfare, the sidewalks having been reduced and infrastructure not having been adapted to that. There are instances where I think that it would be impossible, for example, for a wheelchair to go through because there are these enormous light poles and other obstacles that make it almost like a race course. So, that's a challenge that we're going to have to figure out, and we're not going to be able to solve it alone. But it's something that, we need to keep front and center because it's going to be important. Aside from that, because there are so many streets that are closed on the north-south direction, the district is not well integrated into the city, it's disconnected. I think the city kind of turns its back to it as much as it can. And the zoning itself, it also creates barriers, not just to development itself, but also to the achievement of the vision, the intent of the district that is stated in the code. And something that, I've been thinking a lot about, and you'll see in my presentation that I'm going very sort of strongly in that direction, is to try and elevate the idea of community benefits. The zoning does not really support, I think it says does support, but it actually, I'm sorry, I think I kind of skipped the not. The not is important. It does not support strong community benefits right now. The same is true for the Abraham Tract.
Can I stop you a
Sure.
second? Go back to that. So in 2011, there were zoning changes, and talk to us just a little more about what is your interpretation of what the intent was of those zoning changes? Because you mentioned that it didn't have the effects that they expected, right? 15 years later, like not much has changed.
Yes.
What's to keep that from happening now with what we're doing? Like what what was the stated intent in the code of what they wanted to do? How is that, what are we addressing that that they missed? Because I would hate to be in the same boat 15 years from now that we tried to make some change and it didn't.
Right. Well, one thing that I don't know, since I wasn't there and I don't know all the details of what happened in that moment, I don't know if a market study supported and fed into the changes that were made, right? This time, we're doing that. We're looking at the market, and even though some people may say, well, it's telling us something that we knew, but we have the evidence that this is trending. Like, these are the changes that are happening in the economy, and this is the demand that we have, and so we know we have data-driven evidence that we can use to amend our code, for one thing. But the other, this is my assessment of it, and having looked at this code a lot now for the last couple of years, that there was like a conflict, an internal conflict. On the one hand, there was a desire to stimulate growth and development in this area, to make things happen so that this would become a vital, walkable, safe district. There wasn't yet a lot of thought about the Abraham Tract, I think, but at the same time, I think there was a tremendous amount of fear of what could happen. And so these two forces are battling each other in the code. They're battling each other in the zoning and the charter, which are all part of the Code of Ordinances. The zoning said, well, we're going to promote, encourage mixed-use buildings with residential, but the charter says, no, not really. We're not going to let multifamily happen, and you can only do it if you do it like 3 or 4 stories. So there's like this sort of tricky line that they're trying to walk, but these two forces are definitely fighting each other. And there are a lot of things in the code that are like that. It's not just that particular aspect, that's perhaps the clearest, but there are other things which I'll talk a little bit about.
Okay.
That's my impression working with the code. Perhaps someone else disagrees, but some of the changes that happened then were there was this larger district that encompassed all the airport, Gulf district, and Northwest 36th Street and the Abraham Tract. It was sort of like all this one thing, and in that iteration of the changes, they split them up into these 3 areas. Right. So there was some sense that they had, a differentiated character, but the structure of the zoning for all 3 really is the same. So it's not that tailored to the differences between these areas.
But suffice to say, your reading of the code now and the zoning is that there are barriers that are keeping it from...
There are significant challenges to, yes, absolutely.
That are keeping from the kind of growth and development
Yes.
that we want to see in order to revitalize that area.
Right. And I just want to make it clear that I am fully cognizant that change doesn't happen always quickly.
Right.
Right? You can make a change in your zoning and you may have to wait 3-5 years, sometimes even 10 years, depending on what it is that you're trying to do and how you're doing it and what your conditions are.
Right.
But, I think this area is too visible and is too strategically positioned for change to be lagging this much behind. In the last 2 years that I've been here, I've seen basically 2 projects, actually 1 project that has come through that is about to start construction, and another one that is, has been sort of floating around for 3 years, maybe more, that is coming back now and still kind of dipping its toe. And then another one that I know was approved in the last maybe 5 years that is sitting on that approval. So, that kind of tells me something. All right, so that's for Northwest 36th Street District. About the same thing for Abraham Tract in regards to the zoning, but you know, the situation there is different. I mean, I think that there's a tendency to forget that it belongs to the city because it's, you know, so separate, both physically and functionally. But now there is a real opportunity to leverage growth that is happening to the south. And that and other changes that are also going to position this area much better now. I think it's the time to take advantage and make the changes, put them in place to have the city prepared to really get that opportunity, you know, to be ripe for interest. One of the biggest challenges that we see here is the poor connectivity. That's just not, you know, from being separate, but even internally. I mean, I just came from that area and I had to wait about, I think, 4 or 5 cycles of the light, and it's chaotic. I mean, every time that I come that way, I get so nervous because, you know, it's like, hey, people are trying to like go this way, and it's impossible to imagine that even internally to that area, anybody staying there, for example, at one of those hotels, would feel safe going out and walking or, you know, going anywhere. And how can they even imagine that they could come to the city, right? But the same could be said for, you know, some of the other uses. They're just sort of existing there in a little bubble. And there is a lot of potential. So I think the proximity to MIA there is very beneficial on the one hand, because, you know, it's just a perfectly positioned, you know, land. But at the same time, you know, we have some challenges in addition to the ones that I just mentioned with regards to how much development we can imagine putting there, because it is within the airport zone of influence. And therefore the airport has control over what happens, and has airport zoning that is pretty restrictive. So we'll look at that a little bit as well. But this is what I'm talking about. You know, the airport zoning has the noise contours. Those are particularly in the blue and the teal line. So they're impacting the Northwest 36th Street District, but the yellow lines and the red lines, what you see there, are the height restriction zones, and they go in 10-foot increments. So you can see, and actually let me kind of so I can see it too. You can see that on the south side of the Abraham Tract, at the sort of center on the south side, we are at 50 feet. So that means that the next yellow line is going to be the 60 feet. And then on the north side, you go from 110. I'm sorry, from 100 on the west side to 110 to 120. So what you see, the Embassy Suites, that is the tallest building that you have there. That's because it's on the northeasternmost corner of that tract in that highest zone. But that is the highest zone. So we'll talk a little bit more about this when we get to some of the ideas that we're exploring for the Abraham Tract. And actually, I'm happy to say today that the potential is even better than I thought, I think. Thanks to Ed for clarifying some things for me today. But market evaluation, like I mentioned before, it's really important to this exercise. And even though it may seem like it's giving us conclusions that we all know instinctively, it's been done on the basis of data. So we know that the city is very strategically positioned within the region. With its proximity, very central, with its proximity to the airport and all these employment centers. Those areas in purple that you see, all of that is employment all around you. Airport, logistics, right? And of course, the airport is one of the biggest employers in the county, and you guys are just right, they're your neighbors. So those are tremendous opportunities. In addition, we know that Miami-Dade County and South Florida and the whole state is in a tremendous housing crisis. And there is a lot of pent-up demand for additional housing units at the same time that we see dwindling supply of raw land. So some of those are the opportunities that we see. You see in green the roadway network, very well connected in the surrounding area. And also we see some little squares with little icons. Those are different kinds of assets and liabilities that we have, that we call at least destinations, things that are attractions or that could be detractors in and around Miami Springs. So we looked at all of that. I'm going to say that the study, the market study, kind of looked at what are the keys to success. Grounding our conclusions in a market reality, I mentioned that in response to your question, Mayor, but also the need to set this framework that we're working on as a way to accommodate change. Like, it cannot be something that is fixed. We're going to have to sort of continue to calibrate as we see the market moving and reacting to the market so that we can continue to be responsive to it. At the same time, this has to be a plan that provides us a roadmap. It has to tell us, what the steps are, what actions to take, and allow us to track our progress as we go. So we're going to be looking at, numerical indicators of performance to tell us how well we're doing over time. Public investment and partnerships are going to be really important. I think that maybe this is wrong on my side to say or to think, but perhaps after the 2011 change, the city was kind of passive, sitting and waiting for things to happen. And I think that if you really want this to happen now, you're going to have to, as a city, be a little more aggressive to go out there and look for those partners to help you accomplish certain things, and to go after the kind of development that you want. Talk to developers, bring them here, interest them. Essentially, the city doesn't have an economic development office, and perhaps you don't need one necessarily, but there's got to be some action taken as if you did. So I think that's important to say. And then, of course, the fact that as a city and as an elected body, there has to be a commitment. Once you get behind the vision, you have to sustain it. You cannot kind of, go back and forth as to, well, maybe we should do this or maybe we should not do that. If you are going to go behind the vision, just kind of move forward strongly, and forcefully to achieve it. The bottom line of the market study was that on the Northwest 36th Street district, there is a robust demand for market rate multifamily, residential, and of course, hotel development. That's kind of a natural fit because of the proximity to the airport. And that retail and office can have a strong support role to the residential and the hotel, but not necessarily be the starring the starring role. At the same time, the Abraham Tract, I mentioned, some of the things that are happening in the Lake Palmer area, Freedom Park to the southwest, and all of that gives this area an even greater potential for industrial use in the form of logistics, warehousing, light manufacturing, with also great potential for ancillary office and commercial use, and the continuation of airport supporting lodging. And one of the things that we made sure to do from the very beginning of our process was to talk to stakeholders in the district, property owners, business owners, developers that are developing in the area. And every conversation that we have had so far with them confirms these findings. This is what they see, this is what they expect as well. And so we feel comfortable that these findings are valid. So with all these different sort of outcomes of our evaluation, we came to the council in May, and at that workshop, we asked you to give us some directions so that we could move forward. And the direction that we received was to consider distinct smaller districts, each with their own character and standards. Because one of the things that we talked about during our discussion of our analysis was that, yes, the corridor, for example, the Northwest 36th Street corridor is long and is narrow, but it has these segments that you can see differences in character, right? And perhaps they should not be treated the same. So we got direction from you to look at that and see whether there was something that we could do to treat these areas differently. We also got direction from you to look at the current regulations and clean them up and streamline them so that we could better facilitate revitalization of the area, promote beautification and design appeal, to be or to make the area more consistent in character with the rest of the city, encourage pedestrian-friendly frontages, safe walking and circulation, access and connectivity, and finally, to explore measures that would be needed or actions that would be needed to make market-rate multifamily development viable where it hasn't been. Even though I will just say that multifamily residential is a permitted use as of right as part of mixed-use projects in the Northwest 36th Street District. So that's just kind of an observation on that part. So with this guidance, we went away and we started looking at what we needed to do, keeping in mind that we have a big challenge ourselves, because what we have to achieve is a balancing act between the need to incentivize development and remove barriers, minimizing the impacts of development, while maximizing the benefit to the community. So this is not something easy to achieve. We'll do our best in looking at this sort of menu of options. And I'm going to go through them right now. And I just, I kind of put these menus together for each one of these areas. And there are some that are portrayed as being sort of alternate measures, but that doesn't mean that these are mutually exclusive. These are not separate scenarios. Things could be combined, and they also could be achieved over time as things change. So I'll preface my observations by saying that. But there are some things that I think that we should be doing in general, regardless of whether we go for some of the more imaginative solutions. And that is a list that you have here in front of you, which includes revisiting the transition zone standards between the district, the Northwest 36th Street District, and the surrounding uses, or the adjacent uses to the north, evaluating the list of permitted uses. I think that we need to start being a little more forceful in requiring ground floor activation and transparency of facades. And realizing that there are challenges to that, but there are also ways to do this. Reviewing the parking and site access standards, and in conjunction with that, working with DOT to see what we can do to improve the conditions of the public sidewalks on Northwest 36th Street, while at the same time looking at what we can do on the private side to also contribute to a better sidewalk situation. I put a lot of emphasis on the district branding. This is not a regulation thing, but I'll talk more about it. And I believe in place branding a lot. I think that, you know, when we place brand, we can do sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we believe that we are this, we will become this. That's what Austin did. And I put together a little list of resources for you to read a little more about this if you want to, but we'll talk a little bit more in my presentation as well. So that's outside of the scope of the regulations, but, you know, I think that that needs to be done regardless. Also important is going to be to clarify and streamline the development approval process. There are a lot of things in this code that are sort of vague. You know, they're left up to interpretation. Developers don't like vagueness and they don't like uncertainty. And so, and also for the benefit of the city, we need to be clear so that there's no room for, you know, misinterpretation. You know, sometimes it's unclear, you know, how many steps you have to go through to get to the end. So things like that, I think we need to look at. This next line, I've thought a lot about, you know, I've looked at this FAR bonus. I looked at it when we were doing the Gateway because it's similar. And we have one here in North of 36th Street District. We have one in the Abraham Track, and we have one for the Airport Golf. They're all pretty much the same. And I'll talk about these in a moment, but I think that we need to either revise them significantly or completely eliminating them. And then replace that with a true public benefits program. And I'll talk about that also more in a moment. What are public benefits? This is a concept that refers to the positive impacts that a development project provides to the surrounding community. I know that, you know, it happens very often when a development comes before you, people are opposed to it and they don't see any benefit to it. But there are ways to leverage the development during the approval process to truly bring benefits to the community, tangible benefits. So this is accomplished typically in negotiation through a legally binding agreement. Sometimes when it is between the local government and the developer is via a development agreement, and now you're familiar with it. We just went through that process for that project in the Gateway for 30 Canal Street. And sometimes it is actually a pretty interesting method when you have a community organization that is recognized by the city as a stakeholder in the development process, and they participate and negotiate with the developer themselves and get the terms you know, spelled out in what is called a community benefits agreement. So those are two different kinds of tools where you can do this, formalize it. These agreements are enforceable. And the benefits that developers have to provide, they must go above and beyond what they will legally be required to do. They cannot say, oh, I'm going to provide a fountain on my property. Well, we don't care because the code says that you have to provide a fountain. So it has to be beyond anything that the code says that you already have to do. The benefits can be tangible, they can be direct, they can be in the form of infrastructure improvements, land exactions, land donations. They can be in the form of money, contributions that are provided to make these improvements instead. They can be in the form of programs. For example, when a community requires that there be local hiring or workforce training. Perhaps these are not things that the city might be interested in, but in other communities, sometimes those are really important. And sometimes, you know, there are things like, you know, you commit to support our local businesses in various ways. So, you know, there's a wide range of ways in which the the benefits can be defined and negotiated. You don't have to go for all of them. One of the most common ways in which development agreements are used is to provide workforce housing, for example, or affordable housing in a community. And that may not be something that you need to do necessarily, but there's a whole range of things that communities negotiate. And some of them are in the form of financial contributions that the city then decides how to use versus the developer themselves, investing and making the improvements. So somebody may ask perhaps the question, well, but we already have a benefits program. What about our FAR bonus? It says that there are things that developers have to do in exchange for getting, additional FAR. And the reason why I don't think this really works is because these are not framed as benefits. These are, design bonuses that are given to the developer in exchange for doing things that are not really beneficial to the community at large. For example, we give FAR for hotel rooms, for having hotel rooms. Well, that's a permitted use already, and if you choose to do that, you're gonna do it. Why should we give you FAR for that? It would be better if we just set the FAR that allows you to do the hotel, if that's what you are going to be promoting, which in essence is what's happening now, because you can't do mixed use, at the levels that the code says that you're supposed to be able to do. Then, the natural option for a developer is to say, well, I really can't do a viable mixed use building here. I'm gonna go for a hotel. If you're gonna go for a hotel, then, why are we gonna, sort of give you FAR for that? And there are, other features there, like a porte cochere or an entry plaza or decorative gates or water features. I just don't really feel that those are beneficial to the community at large. They are features of the site plan, and they can benefit the site plan, but not necessarily the community. If you have flooding around the city that needs fixing, and you don't have enough funds to do that, that would be a real benefit. If you are in need of parkland, that would be a real benefit, et cetera, et cetera. So
let me ask you a
sense-
question,
Sure.
Sylvia. So how do you just require these kinds of design elements that you think help to promote the kind of like pedestrian walkability and things like the kind of
Absolutely.
porte cochere and the entry plazas? What do? You just make that
Yes.
a requirement rather than incentivizing
Yep.
doing it? Okay.
Put it in your baseline of design standards or site plan principles.
Right.
You put it in the baseline. And I mean, like, I think these are pretty basic things. There are, probably there are design features that, perhaps go well above, and perhaps you can incentivize those. But to me, these are really sort of par for the course that you're going to do. If you're a hotel, more than likely you are going to have a porte cochere because you don't want your
Right.
you don't want your guests to get wet while they're unloading your car. So there are things like that I see here that I don't think are particularly effective, and the combination of these in order for developers to get their FAR. You just kind of see it the way that they're like, oh, I'm just going to pick a little bit here, a little bit, just the minimum necessary to get the FAR. And it's not really giving the community the benefits that you could be negotiating with them. So I'm going to shift gears now and go to the character zones. The way that we are identifying these is not fixed. I want to point out the boundaries can change. We can adjust them as we go in this process. These seemed natural boundaries based on our evaluation, but that doesn't mean that they're the right ones. There's no wrong ones either. And even zone 4, the Abraham Tract, could be 2 zones, because right now that one has a different character. And as I mentioned, the airport zoning restrictions treat the 2 areas a little different in terms of height. So there's a possibility of that too. And this preliminary characterization, I also want to say that the names that we have picked are just, a way for us to identify them, but doesn't mean that they're the right ones. I'm not a branding person. I'm a big fan of branding, but I'm not a marketing person. I'm not a public relations person. So, we just picked these names to try and reflect what we see as a character right now. They don't have to be the final ones. Okay?
Excuse
Yeah,
me,
thanks.
Silva. As to what you're saying with the names, and
Yeah.
I know it could change, but also, like you were saying earlier, you manifest it as you think about it. So maybe that's something that we should also
Absolutely.
work on. So
Absolutely.
thank you.
And whatever they are, whatever the names are, I think that they should be identified. The districts should be identified, they should be branded, and the sub-districts should be as well, because imagery matters. It's part of the storytelling, right? And I'll talk more about that. I don't want to get too caught up in it, because I do like that aspect of it. But in any case, zone 1, which is the one that you saw between Curtis and Curtis Parkway and Palmetto Drive and Fairway Drive and Northwest 36th Street District, that's what I'm calling Main Street. Zone 2 is the next to the west, and we'll go over the boundaries in a moment, but we're calling that the hospitality zone. Zone 3 is the easternmost segment of the corridor. We're calling that the urban village. And the Abraham Tract we're identifying as a business park, okay? So I'm going to turn over to Zone 1, the main street, and that's that area, Curtis Parkway to Palmetto Drive. It has the shallow, smaller sites. It has a lot of fragmented ownership. It's different from the other segments on the corridor because it's a double-loaded super block. It's long and skinny, and it has streets on both sides. And for that, partly for that reason, but also its location, is the only segment of the district that does not directly abut single-family residential. To some extent, that's an advantage. It also has the highest predominance of older buildings in the entire corridor. So some of the strategies that we are identifying potentially would be, instead of trying to change it too much, let's try to encourage the retention and improvement of an investment into the existing buildings. Because this is sort of like, it's not historically significant, but it is historic by age, and it represents the old character of that area. A lot of those buildings do. So maybe we let it be and just encourage it to improve. We focus on the low rise of those buildings. We leave the charter height restriction in place for residential uses. We perhaps even contain the height for non-residential. The whole district, Northwest 36th Street District, the maximum height is 150 feet. Maybe here it isn't. And, I haven't talked to our attorneys to see whether that's even possible, like pulling the height back. But maybe that's something that we could explore. And along with that, I've been thinking about the uses. We have a prohibition on freestanding uses such as restaurants, commercial, and office. But maybe this is the area where you allow that. Maybe you let them be, Maybe in some of those buildings you allow live-work units. That's a different kind, it's not multifamily residential, but it's a different concept. Maybe you allow that. And potentially, maybe you even exclude hotel as a permitted use in this area. That's, I'm not sure if that's gonna, go well, but that's an idea.
Sylvia, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
What's your assessment of the parking in that zone one? Because I've
Well-
seen, I have my assessment of the parking.
Okay.
What's your assessment of the parking?
Well, I think for redevelopment purposes, I think it's challenging because the sites are smaller. Like, the block is not too deep. And in fact, I see it in one of the projects that we're looking at now, that it's actually looking to develop or redevelop rather, an assembly of land. So it's not a small site, and yet in order to accommodate their parking, they're going to have to put it beneath the building, which means that they're not really activating the street. And we can't prevent them from doing that because we don't have anything in the code that says that you can't do that. So we're going to have a building that, it's going to look nice, but it's basically parking on the bottom and, hotel use on the upper floors. So I think that parking can be challenging for the purposes of redevelopment, because if you are going to try to maximize the development potential of these sites, the more you maximize it, the more parking you need. The more parking you need, the more of your site that you're gonna have to use either for surface parking, or you're gonna have to do structural parking, which is really expensive. And if you said, this is trying to sort of fit all these pieces together, and something has to give. So that's kind of how I look at it. For the existing uses, I think that a lot of them obviously they don't have parking in the front, because these are, front facing on Northwest 36th Street District. So the parking is in the back, and they do have insufficient parking. But if we can try to make this more of a pedestrian, you park once, and you have businesses where you park once and then you walk, and, it's sort of like a little main street with little restaurants and retail. And this is serving. The idea is not necessarily there's going to be like, this is where your CVS and your Publix is going to be for the residents to go, but it's going to be more oriented to serving the hotel district. But it's going to create a destination. So maybe there's not going to be the need for additional parking for those uses, because it's going to primarily be serving people who are already there. That's an idea. What is your assessment?
No, I've seen, right, there's a lack of parking on
There is.
that street, and I've
Are you
seen
talking about
people.
Fairway?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I've seen people park on the grass, and there's those little apartment buildings that are there too, so that's a problem.
Yes.
Hotels, can we approach them to share parking with the hotels? Like that Clarion has a huge parking lot. Is that a possibility? Is there an agreement?
There
I
are
mean, we put
yeah.
signs that says you park here at your own risk. Is that possible to do?
You can try to do anything with, like the parties are agreeable. And I think that your attorneys can tell you more about, those kinds of arrangements. But I've seen, like the shared use. And one of the things that the city of Miami Springs doesn't do is allow for shared parking, like trying to account for the differences in usage throughout the day. So if you have office, you need it in the morning and during the day, but then after 5, that parking sits there. And could you use it for other purposes? Sure, if you can arrange it with the owner. So yeah, there's,
So, and a business can actually have some type of meter system too, right? I mean,
of course.
so, I mean, a hotel guest doesn't pay for parking, but they have a ticket.
Yes,
Anyone else can pay a meter,
that
technically.
I've seen that too.
Okay.
And let me also segue into the next slide, which talks about a different concept, which, doesn't necessarily solve the parking, but it kind of,
Maybe rezoning and I don't know how good of an idea that is, but the so it's 36th Street on Fairway, and then there's some apartment buildings back there, right?
there are hotels in the back, there are hotels and apartments, right?
So
So
somehow
this
connected.
is precisely that next concept that I have on the screen now. This is where we actually go crazy. We turn our back on Northwest 36th Street District. I mean, on Northwest 36th Street. We turn our back entirely and we make Fairway our front. And that's our main street. We synergize with the Airport Golf District. That would involve probably looking at that zoning also, see how that could work. But then now we really have a street where you could even have maybe on-street parking, like organized on-street parking. Improve the sidewalks, improve the street. That's more of a long-term thing, obviously. But that could be another way of dealing with this this segment of the corridor. And like I said before, maybe just focus on retail, on restaurant and services to support the hotels that exist today and probably will exist in the future on the north side of Fairway, as well as to the east, in the next segment from the Palmetto Drive east. So this is a different concept. It could be, like I said, something a little bit more long-term, and it might require a pretty different approach to the zone.
Sylvia, isn't there
Yes.
isn't there already a hotel that's going into this area?
It is.
There is, right?
There is. But like I said, I mean, certainly that hotel would still be legal.
Sure, just legally non-conforming.
It
If we
would,
were to
it
do
would
something
remain,
like
you
that.
know, and there's it's not the only hotel that is in that segment, but it also, I think, would, because it doesn't have a prominent front. Like I said, it doesn't have ground floor activation. Essentially, I think it's going to have access from Northwest 36th Street District to Fairway, and sort of rotated to Fairway would not be such a stretch. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Once it's built from that perspective. But yeah, I mean, again, none of these are things that are like, oh, you take this package and this is, this is the way that this package of tools is going to work. Like if I, on that first slide, I said, well, this could be the strategy. That doesn't mean that you have to take it as a whole. You could say, well, we like this idea, but we don't like that one. I don't know, maybe we don't need to exclude hotels, but maybe this is more of like, a smaller boutique hotel kind of area, maybe, bless you, not, obviously not 150 feet in height, but maybe, which is about, 13 to 15 stories, but maybe, 5 or 6 or 8 stories,
Does the height restriction go up as you go on Fairway? Those buildings?
It could.
Yeah.
It could. We haven't worked those details out, and I want to tell you that, even though in my office we've been talking a lot about these and sort of tossing all these ideas around, we don't have a piece of paper in our back pocket that has already made changes. So we don't know what the height would be. We don't know what the setbacks would be. We've thought about what they could be if it is in this direction or in that direction, but because we're here to explain this to you today, hear your discussion, and then next Monday to go to the public and hear what they think. We are not trying to get ahead of any of that discussion.
Do you know how tall the Clarion is?
What's that?
The Clarion.
11 stories, one building, and I think 7 the other.
Yes.
That's in zone 2 though, right? That's in zone 2.
Yeah, that's not in.
That was,
zone
the other one is in zone 2. Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's zone 1. That's, the 2 potential concepts. And again, these are not mutually exclusive. Other things that, the city would need to be thinking about is continuing to improve stormwater, sidewalk, streetscape. On Fairway, that would be, for the long term, if you decided that you wanted to explore that concept of turning it around. And at that point, then you would have to, as I mentioned, probably review at least and consider whether there are amendments that you would do to the Airport Golf Zoning District as well, so that you can create this sort of like, double double-loaded Main Street aspect.
Can you go back to that slide again? Can you just elaborate on the permitted uses there that you felt like we needed to revisit?
Here?
When you say allowing freestanding restaurant, commercial, and office, what do you mean by that?
Well, again, and we would need to clarify what that means exactly. You know, we
Right.
have some freestanding restaurants in this district, right? Today, the former Burger King, the former Miami Subs. You have a Burger. I'm sorry, not Burger King.
Downstairs.
A McDonald's, right?
The
IHOP.
downstairs? Downstairs, the gas station?
Yes, that too. Mm-hmm. That exactly. So there are a lot of, you know, like.
I've seen food trucks.
Oh yeah. We don't have any regulations for food trucks in our code, by the way.
Oops, did I say that?
It's okay. I mean, I think that they're cool, but you know, we don't have anything to help them. So I'm not necessarily suggesting that we have to allow these two-story buildings to turn into McDonald's every, you know, like with a drive-through, and maybe we restrict that. But one of those smaller buildings could be a restaurant, like as they are, you know, attached to each other in this Main Street configuration, right?
But are they currently not disallowed?
No,
Okay, because it said
But-
allow them.
freestanding, yes.
Right.
Freestanding restaurants are not allowed.
Right.
Okay, that was the question.
Existing restaurant there.
Existing restaurants, yes. But I'm thinking freestanding in a sort of in a different configuration, because I think the prohibition of freestanding today, it applies to everything, obviously, but it's more to prevent the Burger King and the IHOP and the McDonald's and, you know, all of those are freestanding. And there's other uses that are also prohibited as freestanding uses. You can have restaurants in this district if they are on the ground floor of buildings with other uses. And the same with other types of uses that are in that prohibited list as freestanding. So I think that we just need to kind of look at that list and see, you know, what the real reason for restricting freestanding and what that really means. Are we talking about fast food restaurants? Are we talking about, restaurants with drive-throughs and, you know, the kind of massive parking that surrounds the building? I don't know exactly whether that was the intent, but there are ways to do a freestanding restaurant inside a building that doesn't have that doesn't have those components, right? So maybe this is something that, you know, we can look at and explore. Maybe we don't necessarily, you know, come to a conclusion that it's a good idea, but, you know, I'm thinking more in terms of a street that looks like the bottom. And that's Flagler, by the way, into downtown, right? And you see the canopies, and eventually that's going to have, you know, the umbrellas, and it's the ability to have those buildings that are older, that are attached to each other in a row of, you know, sort of downtown configuration or Main Street configuration, if you will, that have those restaurants be the main use. Here we have, these are 3-story buildings, but here we have 1- and 2-story buildings in this quarter. And a restaurant, a cafe, could not really go into one of those buildings and take it over on its own because of that prohibition. So maybe it's not so much allowing freestanding, maybe I'm misspeaking in that, but, you know, sort of looking at the nuances of what that means and separating it. So again, for me right now, everything is on the table, but kind of looking at some of the proposals that have been coming in, you know, questions, because there are constantly questions from business owners that are coming and asking, hey, could we do this in that building? Could we move into that building to do this use? And going to this list, which has restrictions, when, you know, and there are uses that are going into these buildings that perhaps are more appropriate into a freestanding building. And I have to tell them that no, they can't be in a freestanding building. They have to be in a building with other uses, right? So that's kind of what I'm talking about.
So part of me felt like kind of the market would take care of that, right? Like, is it feasible, particularly in this zone where the properties are so narrow? Is it cost effective for a developer to create a freestanding, restaurant or something like that? But then I'm thinking about along 36th Street where they have the Raising Cane's and where, the Famous Dave's and, which is on 36th Street, just like this would be. And so you're saying that there are prohibitions to that development to come in and do something like that. Okay, so I think that's noteworthy. That sure seems like a barrier to me.
Right, and and you see, I mean, you're not getting, and I would say you probably don't want to get any inquiries from fast food chains that are coming to open new developments. New moving into parcels to build from scratch. We have interest in the ones that are there already that are sort of turning over.
Right.
But it's sort of the existing buildings.
Right.
And I'm talking about now this zone 1 with the character that it has, some of the smaller buildings, to really figure out a way to allow it to happen in a way that is a little more flexible.
We would have to, the golf district would have to cooperate for that idea to be.
Well, it would be better if there was synergy between the two, yes. But could you actually create Main Street there if nothing happens on the north side? It wouldn't be as nice, but it could. It could happen. I think it could.
Seen that already?
I have.
To the mayor's point about that area where Raising Cane is, I remember not that far back, across the street, there were one story, there was a deli that I used to go to because I worked in the area. And then over time, that developed into something, and then that was knocked down, and now they've built something else. So Doral has gone through already 3 iterations, at least since I've been in the area. We're conscious about it. I mean, at least we want to get it right the first time, right? That's the plan.
We always leave room to calibrate, obviously, in the zoning. But, you try to put it in place so that it works with the goals that you want to achieve. And again, this is just one of the many aspects of the code that, kind of puzzles me. There are different kinds of freestanding restaurants. Could you have a high quality, restaurant that goes into a site on its own? Would it be so bad if you had a luxury hotel and next to it a nice restaurant? That's not what you have today. But,
Outback.
I was gonna say Flanagan's.
yeah. So anyway, without giving any particular examples. But I just want to point out that I have some imagery on these slides, and not all of it is even necessarily here from South Florida. I just want to give you sort of a taste for the concepts, even though they may not be exactly what you would see if these occurred here. But for instance, in that concept where you would turn the blocks back to Northwest 36th Street District, certainly your sidewalk could become much more pedestrian friendly. You could address your stormwater via bioretention swales and rain infrastructure, and you could do the same on the other side. You could turn like the area where the sidewalk is today on Northwest 36th Street, maybe that could be like a little urban forest, completely green, and stormwater friendly. So I don't know. Again, kind of going crazy.
How does that look? How do you get that to happen? I mean, that's a lot of infrastructure on the part of the city. And if you're do you do it like one development at a time? Like, how do you get the kind of connectivity if,
Well, I mean, if you are negotiating with the developers through development agreements and they contribute, then you wait. You wait until you have enough to begin doing that. Of course, you know, you're going to be looking for grants, and there are grants out there to do this kind of work. So, you know, I think you could try to do it, you know, a little bit at a time, but I don't know if it is as effective if you try to, like, you know, build up and do larger segments. But yeah. And on the Northwest 36th Street side, I think you definitely will have to work really hard with DOT. See if that's even, you know, something that could be considered. But again, we're trying to be, you know, if I was queen, you know, what would I try to do? All right. Zone 2. This is the zone between Palmetto Drive and Lee Drive, Northwest 36th Street District, and then it goes maybe 2/3 of the blocks in that entire segment. Here we also have fragmented ownership, but there are some larger sites and some parcels that are already assembled. I mentioned already that we have predominance of hotel use, but there's also a concentration of multifamily, which is older. And this area is immediately adjacent to single-family residential, which, you know, presents a challenge for, you know, how do you address the transition zone? And also another challenge is that, you know, we have all these restricted access streets. We know why, and they're very justified. I'm not saying that they are, but they represent a challenge also for how we develop in this area. So with that said, the strategy for the potential strategy for this zone includes things like leaving the charter building height restriction in place for the residential uses. Because if we're saying that this is our hospitality zone, then let's not bother pretending that multifamily is allowed. Let's just, you know, removing that as a permitted use entirely from this segment. Let's just make this, you know, the mixed use, but without residential area. Continue to promote hotel development, targeting higher quality. That's kind of the proactive aspect of that you don't sit waiting for them to approach you, but you go and look for them. And perhaps the hybrid use there, which is not multifamily, but is not hotel, is the concept of condo hotel that could be added into this district. So that's a series of tools that we are tossing in here for this zone, but then also potentially, and again, mind you, this is crazy side of things, not saying that this is necessarily viable. It would require a lot of thought, and potentially this could be something that happens not immediately, but over time, is expanding the district boundary to the north so that actually Oakwood becomes your hard boundary. Having the street being your buffer is a better way to protect the residential neighborhoods to the north. But at the same time, consider perhaps in that transition zone, adding the possibility of medium density single family residential typologies like townhouses or stacked units. And maybe even if you want to go even crazier, consider the possibility of reconfiguring the street network. Those streets that are closed today, could some of those be abandoned entirely and the land given to the sites adjacent to them to create larger sites and create better planning? That's like, you know, a really sort of far-fetched, but
yeah, big challenge. I see there's a lot of residential right before you get to Oakwood.
yes.
And I don't know, would that put us in a tricky zone?
It is tricky. If we if we were to consider this over time, this would become legally non-conforming. And eventually, you know, if people sold, they would not necessarily go back to being residential.
Which is probably a benefit to that area. To those, right now, they're definitely being affected by being adjacent to commercial and value, like extremely.
In value. Okay. So again, this is the crazy idea, right? I have a picture of the on the bottom, which is a waterside development, and Heidi's going to recognize it probably also because this is in North Bay Village. But this is an example of a development that created that sort of transition that I'm talking about with the stacked units on the ground floor. So those are like 2 and 3, I think it's 3, and then the higher buildings in the back. So that creates the transition between another use. In this case, it's the water, but you know, I've seen it done in areas where the adjacent use is single-family residential. Okay.
Question,
Yes.
east of East Drive, isn't that all, it's really more multifamily there that's adjacent to that, right?
There is multifamily there. Yes, there is multifamily there. And the interesting thing is, and I was going to talk about that later, that area in the comprehensive plan is carved out of the Northwest 36th Street District. And the future land use designation of that area is multifamily, not Northwest 36th Street District. But the zoning is Northwest 36th Street District. So there's an inconsistency between the comprehensive plan, the future land use map, and the zoning.
Is there consideration to maybe add it to the southeast?
That's kind of what I'm suggesting, because I don't like to have inconsistencies between the future land use map and the zoning. And certainly it would behoove us to look at whether it's a good idea to do a future land use amendment and move that into the Northwest 36th Street District designation. Okay, other strategies. I already talked about being strategic and proactive in attracting the kinds of hotel development that you would want, and and the ancillary uses that we want. So maybe, you already have a partnership with the Greater Miami Convention and Visitors Bureau. They can help. They can point you in the right direction. They're not going to do the work for you, but, they could be a partner in helping you get started. Talked about place branding, and this is the perfect area, for example, where you could do it. You could, have the hotel district, identified with distinctive lighting and banners, streetscape. And these are just a couple of examples. Grand Rapids has its own hotel district, which I didn't know, but they have branding for it. This is on the right. It's not a market. It's not a hotel district signage or banners, but it's kind of the way that you could do something for district wayfinding. So
Sylvia, question.
yes.
Okay, so hospitality zone.
Yeah.
How about something else, a little bit more aggressive? How about something that brings in corporate or tourism,
Sure.
meetings, conventions?
You certainly could do that. It could be in conjunction with the hotels. It could be on its own. Yeah, of course. Certainly.
That would be the zone for it.
That would be the zone for. All right, and then turning our eye towards the last segment on the Northwest 36th Street corridor, it's what we are calling the urban village. And this is where we have the larger parcels. There are existing land assemblages already. It has the best connectivity to the rest of the city because there are no street closures here. But at the same time, funny enough, it has the best potential for being a self-contained urban district because it's sort of like, this little concentration of land with this grid and the larger parcels and the blocks and so on. But we do have the challenge that the larger blocks, the larger parcels are owned by Miami-Dade County. And so we know that represents some difficulties for us. In many ways, they have their own plans for these properties, and they're not necessarily going to let them go easily unless they don't have use for them. But with that said, some of the approaches to strategy include leaving the height the same. I've heard, from some of you, well, should we be looking at higher building heights? But the airport zoning restricts to 160 feet here and by variance. And so I don't really think that we need to try and get 10 more feet. I mean, that's really not going to do a whole lot for you. So heights would stay the same, but this would be the only segment, the only zone in that district where I would say we could be looking at changing the height restriction on multifamily residential that is in the charter. So exempting this area only from that restriction so that you actually could have mixed use here with multifamily residential. Keeping the base density the same, which is 20 units per acre, but then potentially considering a tiered bonus density system that is tied to a community contribution. For example, on a per unit basis. So we could have the base being 20 units per acre, you don't pay anything, but if you want more density, tier 1 gives you 20 units plus X per acre, and you pay a certain fee for each additional unit of density that you get in that tier. If you want more than that, then it would be 20 units plus X plus Y, whatever that is, which I don't know at this point. And then you pay another fee for each unit that you go above the second tier. So those are the kinds of contributions, Mayor, that if you do get redevelopment here, you could be, using for improvements. And you decide, with the help of your attorneys who are extremely experienced in these kinds of things, these kinds of projects, these kinds of agreements and negotiations, how they could be set up to use. But this is the idea here in order to make the area more attractive to redevelopment of mixed use, because developers are going to they're going to be looking at density, right? And right now, 20 units per acre, which is the maximum, is just not going to do it, even if we didn't have the restriction in the charter. So this is where I would think that we should shift the idea of the FAR bonus from FAR, leave that alone, like put a base FAR that is reasonable. In the code right now, we have 1 as the base, and then you can get more up to 3 through the existing bonus system. I would say, let's just forget about that. Let's say that the maximum is 3. That's it. That's the requirement. That's the regulation. That's the standard. And then instead shift the bonus system to the density, and you get a contribution, a financial contribution on a per unit basis on that. I also think that maybe we could look at excluding the parking structure from the FAR, which means that we would go from a concept of FAR to what is called floor lot ratio. That would be another pretty big incentive to developers, because then they're not losing the space that they are trying to maximize to the parking.
We have it in there now where it's included.
It is excluded?
Included, you're
Oh,
saying.
it is included, yes, yes, because floor area ratio includes parking,
Parking.
yes. All right,
And what's the other term you said?
floor lot ratio.
Floor lot ratio.
That's a concept that is more in line with form-based codes, but we can
What kind of based codes?
form-based codes. They're the types of codes that look more at the configuration of your buildings, the design of your buildings rather than the uses. And but we could hybridize our code and take that concept and use it.
Does Zone 3 exclude where the motel is and the apartments next to it on Royal Poinciana there?
It excludes the apartments, but it does not exclude the motel, and it does not exclude the
Miami subs.
Miami subs.
I read that somewhere that that Aladdin Hotel was being converted to apartments.
We had an inquiry about an assisted living facility, but in order to do that, they would have to either amend Northwest 36th Street District to allow it as a permitted use because we don't have it as allowed, or they would have to do what Fair Havens is doing, which is going to O1, which is our office district. Is the only district, don't ask me why, but Office 1 is the district that allows nursing homes in Miami Springs, the only one.
Office 1.
So I don't think that is going to happen. I mean, if it's turned into apartments, that's different. But, apartments by themselves cannot happen there because in the Northwest 36th District, you can only have multifamily residential as part of a mixed-use project, and you cannot have multifamily, according to the charter, more than 40 feet.
Do we have zoning for like a hospital or any healthcare?
It's the same one.
Yeah.
O1. Yes. I don't know why that is, it's an oddity to me that your office district is the one that allows hospitals, but, well, I guess it might be because if it really were like separate office districts, then you would have a hospital with no impacts on residential, but that's not what happens here. So that's not the situation here.
Go back to what you said. You said that there's the restriction of 40. You're talking about the height restriction.
The height restriction, which applies to anything residential that is
Right,
2 units or more.
Right.
So that means multifamily. Multifamily, according to the charter, cannot be more than 40 feet. That's what I'm talking about, yes.
But it could. But the Aladdin Hotel is only 2 stories, right? So
Right, but it is a hotel.
But it's a hotel.
Right.
But it could be converted into apartments so long as it.
No, because you can only have multifamily in the Northwest 36th Street District as part of mixed use. So they will have to have ground floor non-residential uses.
So the multifamily that's along North.
Then, yeah.
Those are outside. Those are outside the district.
No, they're not. They're in zone 2.
But they're outside this zone 3.
Oh,
is what
they're
I'm
they're
saying.
outside of this zone. Yes, they are. And they are non-conforming by zoning. They are conforming by future land use, but not by zoning. All right. So in this zone, the other potential strategies is to very proactively target market rate residential, multifamily residential for sale, as well as destination retail. So you begin to create that synergy, of a real urban environment, urban neighborhood, and identify public realm investment that you will need in order to really sort of begin attracting developers. And then we switch gears, go to the Abraham Tract. This is what we're calling the business tract. The business park. and some of its current characteristics. This one also has large sites and land assembly opportunities. It's blessed by its proximity to not just the airport, but also the MIC. But again, just to reiterate that we have some uses restricted and height restricted by the airport zoning. Two characters for the north and south halves of the district, extremely poor connectivity, extremely poor road condition, and extremely poor pedestrian infrastructure. So potential strategy here in order to kind of achieve this vision of a business park would be to review the list of permitted uses, begin to focus more on, like these are uses that are sort of there, but not fine-tuned, I don't think, to really look at aviation-related freight transportation, logistics, light industrial, and office and service uses in support of those functions, as well as the lodging, which is already there. I think that perhaps what is needed is to consider switching or expanding the zoning to have a planned development concept here. So that would allow for those who may be looking to assemble large parcels of land to really do master planning of those sites in a comprehensive, cohesive way, according to minimum standards that would be established in the code. And then the beauty of it is that the master plan for the plan development would come to you, and you would approve it, and we could set, the individual projects to be able to come administratively, which would be very attractive for a developer, because they don't have to keep coming back to planning and zoning and the council. But that is only if we set a very clear framework of the standards that they will have to meet, so that, once you approve the master plan, you would be at ease that the standards are clear about what they will have to meet in each individual building.
I mean, I'm looking at it's Embassy Suites, it's a Hyatt, a Hampton, Red Roof. That's like, the real estate is really small, the footprint left. I mean, I'm looking at an area of it, I'm looking at the parking lot. Is there room for that?
Yes,
26 acres, that's all you can count.
that's the largest concentration of land that you have in the city for.
So it would be this area I'm looking at with just pavement. It's a parking lot and pavement.
That's
26
payment right now, yeah. But even further, I just discovered this week that, I don't know why I had missed that the county changed its airport zoning regulations, and now it is possible to have workforce housing as a use in this area, which is called the outer safety zone, so we could even consider the possibility of adding workforce housing as a permitted use according to the regulations that are in the county code for that to happen. And there could be housing in this area.
And
In the Abraham tract.
Is that what the most recent conversation that you got from the?
No.
That's not what you discovered there?
Not really.
Because I thought that was off the table, having housing in.
I thought it was, but because we had the conversation with them and they said, well, if the airport allow housing, we might even be interested in that, but we know that it's not possible. So, and that I thought it wasn't possible either, but I kind of got intrigued and I went back because I remembered Ed, I think it was you, who at some point you said, but housing is possible in some instances. And so I'm like, okay, let me go and look. And so I started reading through the ordinance and I was, lo and behold, there it is, We have changes that were adopted in 2024.
So what are the conditions in which the housing would be allowed?
Off the top
In
of
the
my
Abraham
head,
tract.
I don't remember, but I don't know if you.
Primarily, it has to be workforce housing, and it has to.
Workforce housing, which is 140% of AMI, right? Which, remind me, it's like $120,000 a year, thereabouts, right? 123, yeah, right. And the maximum rent for a one-bedroom apartment within this framework was like, what was it, like $3,200. And I was like, $3,200 a month for a one-bedroom apartment?
Sounds like New York.
I know. But there you go. I mean, these are not, workforce housing is not low income. It cannot be.
And that's the confusion, right? A lot of people misinterpret the workforce housing and low income housing. What's the price again for workforce?
Well, I mean, I don't have the whole table. Ed told me this
Ed
afternoon
told me.
about the one bedroom, but we can give you that information, like the whole range from one bedroom to four bedroom or plus.
120% is also workforce.
140 is the maximum, but then it goes
120
down
is also
to
considered
60, right?
workforce.
So anything from 60% of the area median income up to 140
Right.
for the county purposes is considered workforce housing. But if I'm a developer looking to make money, I just go up
Yeah.
to 140. I'm not, if I'm forced to take a lower rent because of the market, I will, but I'll always shoot for 140.
Right, anything under 100%, you start looking at towards the lower income, obviously.
Well,
It's related to the income.
Let's
60%
just
of the
clarify,
median income
let's just
is low.
clarify that low income is anything that is between 0 and 30% and 30 and 60%.
Right.
So we're not there.
Sylvia, I'm sorry. Were you going to say something? Have you heard of anything happening on South River Drive, North River Drive, that heavily industrial area? Have you heard of any type of movement, future planning? Because, anything down the road you see as changing that could impact.
I've been looking for those projects. Do you mean like public investment or?
Yeah, or maybe
Yeah.
rezoning, right?
I have not. I mean, Lake Palmer, that is an area that the county is already promoting. It has its own sort of master plan. That
Palmer
the
Lake, I see it,
Yeah, that they're implementing it, and that's where the Amazon Logistics Center is, and some of those other hotels that that you see that are kind of nice. So I think that the expectation is that. By the way, you see the picture on the slide on the upper. That's a concept for Lake Palmer area. So this is what the
Concept proposed by who?
this is a concept that I believe is part of either the master plan or is one of the concepts put forward by one of the developers. I'm not entirely sure.
And that is county property.
That is county property.
It's a hot pocket. You got the stadium right there.
Yeah.
Right, right.
That's-
Everything that
that's
the
really what
stadium
it
is going to pull in, right?
Yeah. So I suspect that sooner or later, probably sooner, the county is going to have to start thinking about what they do with South River Drive because it's a mess. So having said all of that, that's one of my bullet points, working with the county to improve South River Drive, working with FDOT to improve safe connectivity to Miami Springs and the MIC. And even considering this is an idea that was actually put forward by the property owners there, but it might be something to consider, is like looking at the internal road network configuration in that area, Northwest 31st Street. They said, if we were to take all of our property and do a master plan on it, we would like the city to abandon Northwest 31st Street and for us to be able to completely create an internal network of roads that is different from that. Because according to them, that doesn't work. I mean, I was telling you, you're killing me because I really like that little boulevard. It's very nice. It's the only thing that's nice there. But you have a 4 4-lane boulevard in that area that, you know, it was basically a road to nowhere, you know. So that's an idea that they did toss, and it's something that I'm putting there as, like, you know, at some point the city may want to consider it. I explained to them that they have the ability to ask for the abandonment themselves, but as an incentive, potentially, the city could consider it. All right, so just a few more thoughts. We talked about the multifamily housing that exists as a pocket, Northwest 36th Street District. I mentioned I would like to resolve that inconsistency because the future land use map says that it is multifamily residential, but if you look to the bottom right, that same area is zoned Northwest 36th Street District, which means that according to zoning, those apartments are non-conforming. Streamlined procedures. I mentioned also, you know, ambiguity, vagueness, and there's a lot of things that the city could do. Exploring digital submissions, fee payment, share review platforms to make it easy for the process to move forward. Standardizing the processes and the templates for comments and from staff reports and so on. We already do a little bit of this, current application reviews, but we could formalize it so that it's clear to applicants. There's a concept of pattern books, and I put in the little package that I provided, which, by the way, let me just explain. I thought there were just a few concepts that, you know, perhaps you want to read a little more about. There may be others that you have questions about, and I'm happy to do little fact sheets for those as well. But pattern book is one of those that is in the packet that you have in front of you. A pattern book can be created for the entire area or each one of the areas to make it easy for developers to come and say, oh, I see what it is exactly that they want. And I can just, you know, kind of go through the pattern book and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to do, without trying to guess, right? It doesn't necessarily stifle their creativity, but it gives them much clearer guidance. Pattern books provide guidance from the design and public realm perspective. So that's, you know, an idea. We, I think, need to look at the notice requirements because there are inconsistent, you know, across the different kinds of processes. And also there are some that are severely burdensome compared to what most communities do. And as long as we are consistent with statutory requirements, I think that we can look at these in order to make them more aligned across processes and a little bit less burdensome on both the applicant and the city. This, I know, like in conversations with Heidi, she always talks about let's streamline, and this next bullet point perhaps does not. But if we go the route of community benefits or public benefits, perhaps we could introduce the idea of a required community meeting as part of the development approval process. And that is something that could happen early on. It would be the responsibility of the developer to go out, organize the meeting, invite the neighbors, be there, make the presentation, have the conversation with them. You know, we've seen that tool used successfully in other communities. There are other communities also that have fast track reviews for projects that meet certain criteria. Communities that are very interested in green building, for example, if the project exceeds a certain threshold, they fast track it. Or if what their goal is to have workforce housing, maybe it has a certain threshold of workforce housing, then it gets sidetracked. I don't know what the threshold will be here, and I don't know whether that's something that we would even be interested in doing, but you could fast track projects by establishing criteria that would allow them to then go through a more expedited approval project. And also, on the flip side of that is looking at what the tolerance is in the city for administrative reviews. There are no administrative adjustments here. If you have something that doesn't mean a setback, you have to go for a variance. Many cities have something at a lower threshold that says, for example, yeah, you have you're deviating from the standard setback, but only by 20% of the base requirement. In that case, we can do that administratively with you having to go through Board of Adjustment and then council. So there are ways in which you can streamline development review by setting, those thresholds for administrative review. I left this for last because this is the thorny one. But what we're trying to suggest here is that the approach would be minimally invasive. We're not suggesting changing anything except in that smaller area, zone 3. That's the only place where we are recommending to perhaps look at the restriction and change it so that that area can become the urban village. None of the other zones would be impacted. They would still have the restriction, and every other part of the city would still have the restriction. So with that, I'm just going to finish with my my vision storytelling branding piece. At the end of the day, this is about what story we want to tell about ourselves, right? This is just, I'm not telling you something that you don't know. I mean, I know everybody here in Miami Springs is extremely proud of the city's connection to the history of aviation. But this particular district has its own special connection because of the proximity to the airport. The Pan American regional headquarters were there. You had, some of these buildings that were geared towards, passengers and housing of, crews and so on. And so maybe there's a possibility of taking that as a concept, I even just came up with this, Southeast Springs, where imagination takes flight. Like I said, that's not my area, but somebody can do a much better job of imagining what that concept would be about the story that you want to tell, and then capitalizing on some of those things. Maybe there are tours, maybe there are plaques, maybe, there's a whole possibility of creating a destination there. And that's where place branding and the other concept that goes with it, which is place making, they go together. Place branding is that sort of shaping of the perception and fostering identity to fulfill this prophecy you're trying to create. I put some examples on your list. I don't know if any of you have been to downtown Greenville, South Carolina. It's amazing. And it used to be, frankly, pardon my French, but it used to be crappy. And they basically created this idea, this vision, and just went for it. And things that they had never even imagined. Like many people in that city didn't even know. They knew about Reedy Falls, that, they were like, they thought it was a trickle. I mean, I put a link on your list there to a YouTube video that they did on, I think it's like the 15th or the 20th anniversary. And I think it was the mayor, and he was saying, when we suggested opening up Reedy Falls, people were like, oh no, what are you going to do? I mean, we're going to be embarrassed because, there's only like a trickle of water there. Nobody even knew that there was like a whole series of cascades that was actually back there. And that became the centerpiece of downtown, created, identity and brand. So that's just one story. The bottom one is Lafayette, Louisiana, where I actually did the comprehensive plan. I did the code. I did sector plans. a number of years ago, and one of the concepts was, for placemaking and place identity, that Lafayette sort of, three-dimensional sign, it doesn't have the Y. So visitors, when they come, they take a picture, an iconic picture. They're the Y. They're the Y of Lafayette, right? So, there's clever stuff like that you can do to place brand. And place make goes with it. That's where you reinforce the community brand by highlighting the unique attributes and investing in creating places and attracting people. And that's where you talk about highlighting your local culture, your history, developing your iconic landmarks and destinations, and fostering a sense of place and involving community. And with that, our next steps, just for those who may be watching, next Monday, we are inviting the whole community to come and see us at the Senior Center at 6:30? 6:30. This is not going to be just a presentation. We're not going to necessarily repeat this. We're going to do something much leaner than this on Monday, but we're going to be there in a interactive sort of open house format with boards where people can post their comments, post their ideas, talk to us, have full conversations with staff and my team to discuss everything that we've talked about today. We're going to put it all on the table. What kinds of uses would you like to see? What are your major concerns about, street infrastructure or crime, or, so we're going to talk about it all.
How long will it go for? Because we have, isn't that our city council meeting on Monday?
That's going to be,
It's,
that's in lieu of our council meeting.
Yeah.
Or, well, wait, we have
Well,
the
it's
LPA.
You have an
6 p.m.
LPA.
Is it LPA, and then your second reading for the Gateway will be that same night? It shouldn't take more than 30 minutes to,
So
Right,
what
so
time
we'll
is?
be,
We're doing
we'll be
that
after.
here.
You'll be,
over there.
okay, perfect.
there.
Perfect.
at the
I'll be
adult,
there.
both meetings will be at the Adult Community Center.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
So anybody who comes to that meeting can stay over, and we're going to be there for a couple of hours. So people can come and go. They don't have to stay the whole time. They can come, circulate, go home, or stay the whole time,
So we'll be meeting at the adult center?
Yes,
To be clear, okay,
starting at 6 o'clock.
thank you,
And then the community workshop follows at 6:30.
thank you.
All right, so that's next Monday. And then a month later, September 24th, we're going to come back and give you an update. We're going to tell you what we heard, kind of summarize all the input that we have received, and get more direction from you based on that. We're going to spend October drafting, and then in November and December, we're going to do a lot of engagement. We're going to come back and have another open house with the community to show them what we've been working on. We're suggesting having a joint meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board and the Architectural Review Board, the way that we did for the Gateway at the beginning. That was really useful, and I think that they felt it was very useful. I think that their feedback would be extremely beneficial in this case as well. And then we'll come back and do the public hearings with you all and go through the adoption process. That could be December, could, go into January. But the plan is to be done by the end of the year.
Okay, I wanted to share, could you go back to zones 2 and 3? So I feel that the driving force behind this is that I think that people want to see a revitalization, obviously, of these areas. I think that most people, don't even know that the Abraham tract belongs to the city of Miami Springs, even though it was annexed back in 2009. I think with the stadium and what's happening in the Palmer Lake area, I think necessitates that, and that's why, even though it's separate from 36th Street, it's part. That's why we're looking at Southeast Springs to incorporate that, because of what's happening over on that end of town. Even though it's isolated from from the rest of the city, it's an important asset that we need to start thinking about. But again, I think the driving force behind us looking at this is that, people see the last 10, 15 years, what's been happening along 36th Street, and we want to see revitalization. I know that as part of the market analysis that was done, I know that business owners were asked about what they felt, and I think that a sentiment that came up was that they felt disconnected from the rest of the city. I appreciate because I think that, having, brainstorming like this and coming up with these ideas, maybe only half of this stuff is incorporated, right? We don't know. I certainly have very serious concerns about some aspects of this, and I'll go ahead and share what they are. Like when we refer to street closures, right? Residential neighborhoods often use street closures in order to kind of isolate residential neighborhoods so that you can, cut down on cut-through traffic and increase safety and deter crime. Everywhere that there is single-family residential, to me, I feel like that is sacred. Single-family residential is just different. So I know that the street closures just south of Oakwood make the business area, kind of isolates, those areas from the business areas, but I want the isolation. The expansion, and I've mentioned this before in our meetings, but the expansion of the zones, because it would have to, you're not going to just use eminent domain and you've got like 17 blocks of 4 single-family residential homes all along Zone 2. My read, as somebody who lives 2 blocks from there, my read is that the residents of Miami Springs want the buffer, right? Like these things don't have to be mutually exclusive, right? You could want to promote development along 36th Street. You may want to be in favor of strategically increasing density, but the buffers are important to me.
Of course, and
Right.
there's 2 things that I'm sorry for interrupting you. There's 2 things I want to say. At no point am I suggesting that the streets be open.
Right.
I'm not.
Right.
In fact, what I was suggesting is that some of those streets that are already closed, in a redevelopment scenario, you could abandon entirely to become part of sites, right? And I agree with you that the buffers are extremely important. I just don't know if the existing single-family homes that are there, if they want to be the buffer. They want buffers, but in a way, the ends of those blocks are the buffer.
Mayor,
Right.
can I ask you, the buffers against pedestrian traffic also, or drive traffic?
I'm thinking of like the Coral Gate community, right? I'm thinking of, I think like Glenvar Heights, I think also has like street closures. I feel like
Coral
if,
Gables has a lot on.
yeah,
on
Coral Gables has a lot of,
Lejeune.
But with an attractive development, would you be open to pedestrian traffic, not car traffic? Like walkway that leads community to Zone 2.
I'm telling you, as somebody who lives down there, and this is where I'm coming at it from, right? I'm in favor of promoting development. I'm open to seeing how we can pick some areas, right? And I'll have you. Can you go to Zone 3 for a second? Can you go to the urban zone? So I'm open to strategically finding places where we can increase density. But like within Zone 3, when you talk about like you even mentioned there the fourth potential for self-contained urban district. Like I know that one of the good things about this zone is the connectivity, right? That there's easy ways to get in and out. But again, like along Lee Drive there, and where those street closures are just south of Oakwood, those those serve as buffers. So like if you're saying like changing the charter to allow for an increase of multifamily everywhere in zone 3, does it have to be everywhere in zone 3?
There's not that much.
Not that much what?
Not that much land. I mean, if you don't allow it, like if you don't allow it in the entire zone, you're just not going to have, I mean, I'm not sure that it's worth it.
Well, then it may not be worth it. But I'm just saying, I'm
Because
telling
then
you,
because then what you're
the
doing
least-
is, in a way, is you're kind of spot zoning.
Isn't most of that residential in that area, it's disconnected from that area, except for that one block with those 4 acres that were going to be potential townhouses, and now might not be.
Actually, maybe not, because Airbus is
Multifamily on the
interested,
bottom, right?
Airbus is interested in developing,
Right, so
so.
they'll find a way for something like that.
I mean, the airport is not likely going to give up that land. So if you would like to leave those out, I guess you could, but then I don't know. I mean, like, I think that they're going to be out just by nature of their ownership rather than by zoning, you know?
Like I was saying earlier, the east side from East Drive, that's all multifamily already.
but we're talking about that area in zone 3, and literally all the western parcels of zone 3 are not even part of their aviation property. They're the Chase lot, the Airbus lot, the parking lot. You know, when we talk about, like, it's no less land that our zoning has any say over. When you say it might not be worth it because it's not enough space, like that's not ours anyways. That's aviation. They decide what they're going to
They
do there.
decide, it's true, but there is an opportunity potentially that right now they're talking, last year they were talking about multifamily housing. Then they were talking about townhouses. Now it's Airbus. So all I'm saying is that things change. And I think that this would be, in fact, I even thought that perhaps, you know, there would be a scenario in which you kind of square off that little notch that is multifamily on the north side of South Royal Poinciana to be part of the district.
So you're talking about all the multifamily along,
Not all of it, but just, you see that little notch?
right?
Those are the
Yeah.
apartment buildings.
Right.
Yeah.
So north of Reagan, I know you have Lee Drive there. The street that's just to the east of Lee Drive is Reagan Drive.
And I don't know if I can, yeah, can you see my,
Like a third,
Yeah.
sorry.
third block.
This little area here.
That's all river, that's river canal property,
Apartments.
right? Water property
Apartments.
Property.
and apartments.
Well, yeah.
Rentals, if I believe, maybe.
So.
I mean, if you're looking on the map, so first of all, that notch makes it seem like things are oriented kind of diagonally, and they are not, right? They're actually, you know, those apartments are all kind of oriented north-south in that little notch you're
We go
talking
to an
about.
actual map, Sylvia? Can we
Let me
call
see
up
if I
an
can
actual
find-
map? I think it would help us a little bit get a clearer picture.
I'm gonna do Google Maps for ease. And look at that. It went straight to Miami Springs. Here we are. Oh, I'm sorry. I know. I'm sharing only my. Let's see. Only the
feedback.
presentation. There we go. All right.
Where's East Drive?
So this is already part of the district. This is already part of this. No, I'm sorry. This is part of the district. This is part of the district. But the squaring of the boundary could take this and could take that, at least.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just,
The whole
so,
thing's going to be commercial. What are they going to do about that? There's nothing we can do about
What
it.
is?
That whole area behind Lee
This
Drive.
whole area?
Yeah.
those are all the aviation property. Like right now, like we're talking about this whole area and really we have no control over those. In essence, those areas are the buffer between,
We have some control in the sense that even though the county can decide how to use the property, there's still some zoning standards that they would abide by.
Was the county looking for housing? I think that's my impression.
They were
want,
looking for housing, but the last conversation that we had was about the expansion of Airbus operations. So it would be this enormous warehouse with a blank wall, essentially.
but those are conversations with Airbus, not with the aviation department,
No,
right?
the aviation department
Those
is,
are the aviation.
yeah, yes, of course. They have to be involved because Airbus could not
It's
just
their,
move
right,
into
it's
the-
their property.
Yeah.
I can tell you what the people, so just east of Lee Drive, so the street between Lee Drive and the parking lot, that's Reagan Drive, right? So everybody, you know, all the single-family residential west of Reagan Drive, and north of Oakwood, they're not going to be on board. And when you look at Zone 2 and all the people along Oakwood, those are the people that are going to have a lot to say about these plans. And I'm just telling you, it's got to,
But Forest Drive already has multifamily in their neighborhood. A huge project.
south of Oakwood,
Yeah, so.
right? Yeah.
South of Oakwood, yes. And we're not suggesting that it goes north of Oakwood, certainly not. But we also are even suggesting that in Zone 2, perhaps there's no multifamily.
Right, but I mean, there already is some in Zone 2.
Some older multifamily.
Right.
At some point,
It already
Right.
serves as
Turnover.
a buffer from future development, in a way.
but if we brought it in, it could be redeveloped. But if we left out, so again, these are all sort of iterative exercises, right? If Zone 2, with that multifamily, let's say we bring it into the Northwest 36th Street District, it is non-conforming as multifamily. At some point in the future, it changes. Is no longer multifamily because if the zoning did not allow multifamily in Zone 2, it would become then a different kind of mixed use with hotel, for example, or something else.
Can you go back to Zone 2? So you mentioned that, and you said it yourself, right? Like, there's just a crazy idea. Expand the boundaries of the Northwest 36th Street
But
zone.
that's just one of the ideas.
That's just one of the crazy ideas. I get it. I'm not
I-
throwing the
it's
baby out with the
it's the
bathwater.
craziest one.
I'm
But with that said, like, why is this only sharing one screen? I don't know. Hang on. Okay, here we go. All right. So the other concept is not expanding the district, but leaving this as the true hospitality zone,
no, I get it. I'm not
family.
saying that all of the suggestions for the zone are unpopular. I'm just saying for me, again, because of the fact that I live a block from Oakwood, right? I'm there. So the buffers are important. Buffers are going to be very important for everybody. And I don't mean to, make it seem like, we're isolationists, but single-family residential owners want to be isolated. Like, I don't feel like having lesser density condos of multifamily as a buffer from higher density,
Right.
that to me, that's not a buffer.
Well, in zoning, a lot of buffers occur in transition zoning, right? But there are other kinds of buffers too. I mean, let's talk about how we define buffer. A buffer
Sure.
can be a vegetative buffer. It could be landscape. It could be trees. It could be a wall. It could be, what you guys have here is mostly a street closure. Because aside from that, the only buffer that you have between the existing non-residential uses and the residential uses on the same block is maybe the hotel has a wall and a landscape buffer, which is normal. Is that enough? I don't know. I mean, in some cases, I'm certain that the people who live on the other side of the wall don't think so.
Right.
So there's buffers and there's buffers, right? A street can be a buffer, can separate, A river can be a buffer.
Sure. Space can be a buffer,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I get that.
An alleyway can be a buffer.
An alleyway can be a
I'll
buffer.
give you three guesses what level of buffer the people that live there want. They want, barbed wire, right? Which is
Minefield?
right. A moat with alligators. I'm just saying, like that.
Would be perfectly consistent with
This-
the beauty of
We could pull a moat off.
Yeah. I don't like. Not only would I personally not support it, I don't see. I am going to caution us all about, and again, we're not even close to making decisions. These are all just ideas. We're going to get plenty of feedback. I can almost guarantee you that the feedback we're going to get, and it may not be as cogent as what I'm trying to say here, but buffers are really important. If single family residential, I mean, there's a lot of people in this town who, I met them on the campaign trail, right? I lived in Hialeah. I moved in here. We want single family. Like they're not even so much interested in promoting development. They just want to have their little small town. They want that single family residential feel along. I know people that live on Reagan Drive and Lee Drive in that area of Zone 3. Obviously, everything along Oakwood. I mean, that as it is, they want to feel isolated. They don't care
Fine.
if the businesses feel isolated from the city, to be
That's
honest with
just,
you.
I think that the isolation, when we talk about, like if the businesses feel isolated, is not just a physical isolation. I think
Right.
that they feel like the city turns its back on it. And by that I mean is like, it's not investing in them. They don't, So this is what
Right.
we heard, whether it's
Right.
true or not,
Right.
you can decide for yourselves.
Right.
This is their perception. It's not simply that, or they closed Oakwood,
Right.
or they closed half a block from, that's not just all. We heard comments like, well, we get flooding on the street and the street looks horrible to our visitors and we can't get the city to come and fix it. That's a way of being isolated,
Right.
So I think that that's really more of a feeling. It's not just that they feel isolated functionally, although that's certainly, probably true. But that doesn't matter, because if you have a situation such as the one that you have here, where a district has been created in the way that it has with, a half a block, and even some of the houses that used to exist there, like they were, thrown into this district and they have been converted to offices or whatever, right? So we know that there already was a transition. A buffer can be a number of things. I don't know if you all are going to want to consider barbed wire, but I think that we're thinking in terms of other things. And one of the first things I said in the list of items that I think need to be revisited here, regardless of any of these other solutions, we could just leave the district alone without these different zones or any of these other ideas. But one of the issues that we need to look at in the zoning code is the buffering. Because I don't think it's done consistently. I don't think it's done well. So believe me, Mayor, that I am extremely cognizant of the importance of that, and I recognize it, and I support it. And I think that it needs to be done in a way that works better for those neighbors, you know?
I think that they would argue, and I think that they will argue, that those buffers should be as robust as possible to try to isolate single-family residential from any attempts to kind of promote development, particularly multifamily development, things that increase the density. And speaking of buffers, right? The aviation, the Miami-Dade County aviation properties that are there, right? There was, speaking of crazy ideas, there was an idea floated around to have, big towers that were going to be apartments, and there was a big uproar about that because it was going to be just adjacent to single-family residential, and it was going to be incredibly high density. Those properties, again, we don't have a lot of control over what goes in there, right?
correct.
Because that is aviation property. So when they floated the idea of some townhomes that were not for rent, that were for ownership, at least I was kind of in favor of it because I felt like, wow, considering what the aviation department in the county could put there, I felt like that was kind of a buffer, right? Because it's not,
Right.
and
That's
and so
what I was talking about.
if they're
This other
if they're
scenario.
moving towards doing something commercial there, I would even argue that the residents there would see that as kind of a buffer, right? I mean, really, what we're talking about here is promoting development, and where we're talking about like having an exception to the charter so that you could have increased height, and you'd have to have
No.
increased.
No, we're not suggesting increased height.
An exemption, sorry, an exempt for multifamily.
Oh, for
You're talking
multifamily,
about
yeah,
increased
okay,
height for
okay.
multifamily.
Uh,
Right now,
well,
the
no,
charter
no, no.
restriction,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
the
okay.
charter restriction keeps it to 3
Charter-
stories.
Correct. But the zoning already allows it at 150.
I understand that, but it's limited as it is throughout the city. What we're talking about, when we talk about the charter amendment, we're talking about making an exception to the charter in Zone 3, right, to allow for increased height up to like what hotels and commercial properties can have right now, but for things that are multifamily, right? Because right now you can't go above 3 stories anywhere in the city. That's why the town center is only 3 stories. You can't go above 3 stories if you have more than 1 residential unit. So basically anything multifamily residential is limited to that. As we've talked about before, these properties that are on 36th Street are valuable. We're talking about infill development. Like I feel like we're talking about making that charter amendment to allow things, and we're including an entire area there that serves as a buffer because it's aviation department properties that serve as a buffer to those areas that are single family residential. I feel like if there's, if the most recent, thinking is to do something commercial, I personally don't see that as a bad thing. I know that there are people that feel like, oh, that's a missed opportunity. You could do something there that would, provide increased residential density. I don't see it that way. I have a feeling that the residents in the single family residences in that area don't see it that way.
And that's fine. I mean,
Right.
again, as you said, today, those properties are within the district. They're
Right.
within the Northwest 36 district. They're not excluded, not exempted, even though they are owned by the county. And as you said, the county can do what they want with them to.
To what extent can the county exceed our zoning there? Because right now it's zoned the way it is, and we have a charter restriction to height for anything that is multifamily. But To what extent does that bind the county to do what they want to do?
In other jurisdictions where the county has asserted RTZ authority, they've taken full control of zoning and said local zoning doesn't apply at all.
Right.
So that's the position that they've taken elsewhere. I would assume that they'd take that same position here.
Right. It could be multifamily, it could be office building, hotel, whatever they want. It's going to be bigger than what's there now, which is
A parking.
parking lot.
That's-
So the residents that live there and bought there behind a commercial area has the potential to get worse. Without having multifamily, which we should create some type of community, sense of community, which is important as well. I'm just saying, there's nothing we can do about that area, that particular pocket. So there's no buffer that you can help them not be happy or satisfied. We can't control it. The gentleman just said it.
It's definitely worth having the fight, because that's what the people are going to ask for. Or the conversation, better said, not a.
What Ed just said is absolutely true. I think that in some instances, communities have tried to put in place the framework of regulations that will at least allow them to have the conversation with the county to say, look, we have the zoning in place and, yes, this property is yours and you can, go and do whatever you want, but perhaps you could consider this zoning allowance that is more acceptable to us, right? Doesn't always work, the county.
Even with the requirement of green spaces, can that be used as a leverage? Look, you just can't bulldoze this and plant something. Build something, you'd have to have.
These aren't private developers, this is the county. The county.
There's nothing to bulldoze there. These are parking lots. They're all parking lots.
But we're a tree city, so is that an argument? Is that a valid argument to say, well,
Not for their properties. Because again, they're gonna tell you. What is there to save there? It's asphalt. Having said that, one of the things that I find that is missing in the zoning code in Northwest 36th Street District, and probably the other two as well, are better standards for open space and permeability. There's really not much there. So we could do something with that, perhaps. But if they were to come and take full control of the zoning for those properties, even that would not do much.
Yeah, I just think our residents expect for us to at least have the conversation, to at least try.
To try what?
With the properties that belong to the county, for them not to take, full zoning over what we would like to have there. Zoning rights.
I think we're treating this zone. So if can you show zone 3 again? And do you still have the map open?
I do. Do you want to see the map? Or do you
Yeah,
wanna
go to the map.
Okay.
All right, so can you just move a little to the left so we see the very corner where so the Office Depot property, that's Lejeune right there.
Right here.
Right, so not looking at the Abraham Track. That is the easternmost tip of the triangle, right? That is Miami Springs. And I feel that most of the residents and you could see the green space, most of the single family residential in that corner, it stops right when you get to the Chase building, those parking lots. It's those aviation properties. And then everything east of that, even though it's not a lot, but I feel that people would be in favor of allowing an exemption to the charter height restriction in the easternmost corner allowing for higher density there, allowing for multifamily, and having some mixed use and creating a sense of community like that. That's the whole thing. That's what brought us here, right? That's what the market analysis showed, right? The reason we have that charter restriction is because people in single family residential don't want to be next to a high rise multifamily residential unit. Now, we've got people in single family residential that are right next to a 11-story hotel, right? And what have we seen since that charter restriction was put in is that, sure, the reason they wanted the charter restriction is that they didn't want the density, the residential density, because that brings traffic, that brings everything that comes with residential density. So they did that charter restriction. So instead what we have 11 and 12-story or up to 12-story hotels. That brings its own unintended consequences, a lack of a sense of community, of kind of increased crime, the things that somebody in a hotel sees a crime happening, they're not necessarily going to get involved. That's different in a residential area. Right. So I feel that, again, like whether or not it's worth it, I feel like the residents in Miami Springs generally want to promote infill development, right? Where you've got, and I think that's what the market analysis showed. Hey, we've got some hotels, we've got some commercial, but what's missing, which is a huge market, is some multifamily. But unfortunately, in this urban district that's in this southeast corner that we're looking at on the map, it's valuable property, but there's no multifamily there, with the exception of those little apartments that are along South Royal Point Siena there. But again, I think that where this is all going to hinge is how you buffer single family residential from the types of things that we're promoting. I don't think that people are against promoting that kind of development, but I think they worry about having it right next door to them. And what kind of buffers? And again, buffers could be space, it could be, landscaping, it could be a wall, it could be a moat, right? There's a lot of ways to skin that cat. I think that one of the only arguments that we can make to the county when it comes to those aviation properties is like, hey, we want this to match with what the surrounding zoning, we want it. So I don't know. I think that including those properties and having that zone abutting single family residential and saying like, hey, we're going to have this entire zone be exempt from the height restriction for multifamily. I feel that residents are going to see that as a green light to the county to like, sure, put like a high rise,
The irony is that for those properties, we don't have to really do anything. They could just do it.
I get that.
They could just do it without regard to the zoning.
Right.
Yeah, that's their position, right?
What is their position?
I see that's their position. That they can do. They
Sure.
can do it.
No,
without any
and
regard.
we know that, but
Yeah.
I think we're encouraging if we say the zone that you are in is now we're promoting,
Well,
up to 12 stories of residential. I feel like,
but I think I understand, and I'm not necessarily arguing for this, but what I want to make absolutely clear is that when their initial proposal came in for those residential towers that were under Live Local, they didn't need the charter restriction to get up to the 12 stories if they wanted to.
well, so it's exempt from Live Local, right? But like Ed was saying, they don't need it. They could use the rapid transit zone in order to supersede whatever our zoning is. So why are we gonna? I don't know. I feel like we're encouraging it by.
I actually think that, well, I look at it differently because you said when they came in with the concept for townhomes, you thought that was more acceptable. And what I was saying is that is a potential transitional use. So you could have height on one side with hotel or multifamily, whatever the use is, and then go down to townhouse, which is not multifamily. Townhouse for sale is single-family residential attached. That's what it is. Single-family residential attached. So that is one way to create buffering to more intense development. So a wall and a moat.
So, but it's already zoned. It's already zoned for that to allow multifamily.
But not
right now.
townhouses.
I know, right? I mean, that would be less density than
The
multifamily. Right now, it's zoned for multifamily. I feel that including that as part of the zone and lifting the restrictions is just encouraging increasing the density in that area that's abutting single-family residential. So we're going to hear from residents. So
Sure,
we'll
absolutely.
we'll see what they have to say. I think that my reading is that people feel like something has to be done, but again, it's we just have to be mindful because I think that the buffers are important, and I feel that residents of single-family residential want to feel like they're isolated. It may be isolated in that it's lesser density residential, which it's already zoned for now, with the exception of townhouses, right? Like, had that project for the townhouses gone through, if it doesn't look like it's going to, but we don't know. But if had that gone through, we would have had to include, we would have had to change, would we have to have changed the zoning? They could do it anyways, right? I mean, would we have had to allow?
Yeah, the county could have, but
They could have done it anyways, right? I feel like we're signaling something by changing the zoning. And, again, so the latest idea, because, there's been lots of ideas in terms of those properties, but the latest idea is to do some kind of logistics complex or something like that, which is commercial. Yeah, I feel like that would even serve as a buffer between higher density residential areas. You disagree?
No, I don't disagree. I just think that if I lived in one of those houses, I would not want to see a block-long wall of a building with no fenestration. But that's me, that's me.
Well, that's the key. What is it that you want in that area? Do we want to create a sense of community, or you want to leave it just the way it is, which causes crime, people that you don't want to go walking? I mean, to me, I'd rather see, they probably want a butterfly garden right behind there, but it's not going to happen. It's a commercial
we can ask them
lot.
to. We had the conversation with Airbus, and I told them, I don't want this to be a block-long blank wall. I want it to be articulated so that you need to make sure that your building is designed so that it is articulated. So there are design solutions, but they weren't even thinking about that. They were
Right.
like, oh, here's the box, So, I'm not saying that it cannot be a better neighbor, perhaps, but it depends, it depends on what the particular circumstances are. The point is that right now, those 4 properties, the airport properties, are part of the Northwest 36th Street District. They are, and I think that if we leave them out of any kind of framework that we put in place, we also are signaling to the county, here you go, do as you may. We're not gonna even have our say on what happens to those properties. Just go ahead, take them.
What's the possibility for street closures along that boundary area of Reagan Drive and Oakwood in order to isolate them from what may be coming in terms of development?
At Oakwood and Reagan,
Right.
I thought that, well, I may be wrong, maybe
You're saying that there aren't any. I know, that's.
No, I wasn't saying that, no, I wasn't saying that there aren't any there. I'm sorry, let me put this back.
You mean close it just for local
I
traffic?
was suggesting, not suggesting. I was saying that this area is not close to traffic, you know? Like the little zone 3, it has, you know, an internal circulation. You can go this way, you can go this way, right? Whereas here, if you come in from anywhere along Northwest 36th Street District, Northwest 36th Street, you have to find East Drive or South Drive. Right.
Can you zoom into the parking lot, in question? Can you just scroll in and zoom in so that we could see Reagan Drive, the actual, okay. So that is what all those single-family residential homes are looking at right now, which is a parking lot. Okay?
I mean, there's some trees there.
Right. Okay, but it's a parking lot. They're not hedges either. They're
No,
trees.
they're trees.
I get it.
So there's a barrier here, there's a closure
Right.
here at this location, from what I can see.
Yeah, there is.
And that, I would say, will remain.
Right. Yeah, I'm just, all those homes in front of Reagan Drive, I just feel like they are going to be very interested in, and again, we have, you know, very little control over what the county aviation department decides to do with those. But I think that they would be strongly in favor of having some type of buffer between them and whatever comes in there.
Of course.
Whether it's,
And I think that, like, I mean, even from the airport, we can require them to have a buffer between themselves and the street, right? And that's a vegetative buffer. It could be, I don't know, 20 feet of vegetative buffer and a wall, you know, that's a buffer. Both of them together along Reagan
right,
on their side
Right.
of the property. That's a buffer on the developer's side. I think what you're.
but can we require that of whatever the,
Of course.
okay,
We already are doing that. I mean,
Right.
we have a requirement in the Northwest 36th Street District for new development to provide the buffer in the form of vegetation and a wall when they abut, the sites abut single-family residential, which is almost every case. So Pilot House, for example, the parking garage, there's a wall, 6-foot wall, and a vegetative buffer. And the vegetative buffer has shrubs and trees.
Or maybe even make the street Reagan, make it into a one-way and widen the sidewalk and maybe put a bike path as well to
That would
have
be
more
something
space
that the city
between.
could undertake, because this is a public right away. Juan is here.
And
Let's ask him if he wants to weigh in
Sylvia,
on that.
Also, if we expand into Oakwood a little bit, right, and make the buffers even bigger, because now it's commercial, and that's the part of the requirement. So instead of a house being there next to this hotel, it'll be, instead of a house, it'll be green area buffering from any future development. You can make it more. Instead
Sure,
of 20 feet, it'll be
absolutely.
40 feet.
Right, right.
The benefit will be that the person who lives next door is already being affected adversely, markability, because he's next to a hotel or a potential hotel.
You're talking about the half blocks.
The ones that are, yeah.
The quarter blocks,
The
right?
borders.
Yeah.
Made them commercial, you could,
These,
yeah, he's talking about in zone 2 along
yeah,
Oakwood.
exactly, these.
and you just buffer more. You buffer, a larger part of it.
Yes.
I mean, obviously that's more cost to develop
Well,
because
I
you have to
mean,
buy out, some houses.
Maybe, but, could also do it on their property. I think that where I'm trying to find balance there is that right now, there's a step back requirement that if you are next to residential, which is the case in every single one of those blocks, you have to step back your building, step back, right? Not the setback. The setback is at the ground level, but after you go a certain height, you have to step back the building. I think it's like 150 feet,
Okay.
which is a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah.
You know, that makes it really unfeasible from the financial standpoint for a developer to work with. The reason why, let me go to
250 is too
Let me
low.
go to here. And maybe, you know, they would like that. But obviously, even the way that this is the Wyndham Garden, the way that this building was designed was because of that restriction. Because it had to, it could not be like, you know, here at this point and go straight up. It had to step back 150 feet. And not only is that expensive for a developer in terms of reducing the development potential, but it also, even from a structural engineering perspective, to have those step backs is, I mean, let me tell you, architects and engineers, they hate step backs because you have to design your column system completely different.
So that's where they placed their parking lot.
That's why they
I
placed the
saw that
parking lot
in,
there.
I saw that
Yeah.
in Doral,
Yeah.
by around the golf course. You can build right up to the golf course. You had that, and that's
And
where
that's
it
both
became the
good and
parking lot.
bad. That's both good and bad, right? Because the parking lot there does provide a buffer, if you will. It's a great buffer. I don't know. Maybe it is. But at the same time, it could, you know, like in, you know, I think there's a scenario, I'm sorry, in which these buildings could be done with different setbacks and buffering requirements where the volume of the building is actually, it makes more sense from a development standpoint. And you can have your parking in the building, not as a surface parking lot, so that you can still maximize that development and still provide the buffer in the back. These are a suburban model of hotels with this enormous surface parking lot. You know, in a true urban environment, they will not look like this.
I don't think the residents there want a true urban environment.
And I'm not saying that that's what they would get. But again, what is it that we're trying to do here? I think like this is where I'm going to need guidance from you all and from the residents, because if we want no change, then the zoning that you have in place today, that'll do it.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be all or nothing, and it can be incremental. And I think that what we want to do is we want to try to, again, revitalize this area. I do believe, and I think that most people that you talk to believe that some strategic areas where you allow for increased density, in my opinion, I think as you get closer to the southeast corner, and you're further away from single family residential, I mean, whether or not it's worth it, right? I think that we should be cautious about overreaching. I think that the issue is that because these are valuable areas, right? And because the properties are narrow and fragmented, it's hard for development to come in and do, and because of the restriction we have in the charter, it's only hotel. And so we've seen what we've gotten from having only hotels. We have some very nice hotels in the city. We have some hotels in the city that are not very nice. That's what's created what we have. What we have is what we've allowed. I trust that we're all here wanting to be surgical and strategic about how we do it. I feel that we have to, I mean, I think that if you polled everybody along Oakwood, they would want, again, to fortify and make the buffers more robust, right? Like, for instance, right now, so I was on the council. I've been on the council for 6 years, right? So it was in the last 6 years that we voted to close off all of those streets from Mokina and Manola and La Villa and De Leon and De Soto. And so, no worries. You're good. You're good. There were street closures, but it was open and the sidewalks were open and we didn't have vegetation. It wasn't a robust enough buffer. And there were a lot of people from the hotels. Again, some of our hotels are not the greatest. Some are great, some are not. But we had a lot of people walking in. That's my neighborhood, guys. I live a block from there, right? There were people walking in. That's the whole reason that we proposed it, and that's why we put those buffers. We closed off the streets. In many of them, we put vegetation. I feel like that helped. And we also closed off where the sidewalks were, but the alleys are open, right? Maybe that's something else that we could do. I think that everybody there would be in favor of, I don't want to say fortifying, but like making it more robust, that there is a buffer between that and the developments in zone 2, right? And then in zone 3, we don't necessarily have those kinds of street closures with the exception of that one on Lee Drive. But I feel like those single family homes have residents that are going to be very interested also in how they can make their, JC and I spoke with some residents on Miller Drive and they were, talking about like, hey, can you close it off like you've done on Mokina and all these other streets? We get a bunch of cut through traffic. I mean, that's what I think that everybody's in favor of promoting development. I think that most people agree that after 10 to 15 years of seeing what the consequences of basically limiting multifamily residential in those areas and allowing just like commercial and hotel, what the result is of that has been. I think that most people agree that maybe we should include, and I think that we, by virtue of the consensus that we had to ask them to come up with these ideas, that we are all in favor of finding ways to attract some multifamily residential, because that is a very strong market that we're not tapping into in this southeast corner. I just feel like it's got to be very mindful of how you are delineating a buffer and isolating multifamily residential, because I feel like they're going to want that, and I think that we should be mindful of that.
Mayor, in some cases, they already have it, right? Correct? Some cases, single family on Oakwood already have multifamily, correct?
Well,
across
there's
the
a
street from
pocket,
them.
there's a pocket of multifamily somewhere.
Right. And there's a
along
parking
the
lot that
corner.
potentially could be an aviation site as well, in front of the single family. Not just the other one they talked about.
Mayor, I think myself, Sylvia, Heidi, staff, we agree. There could be, we can buffer it as best as possible. How much space we have for buffering, how robust we can actually realistically make it, we'll see at that point. But I think we're all in agreement that, to provide buffering. I don't think anybody here said anything otherwise.
No, nothing at all, no.
So, I mean, you jokingly mentioned moats and whatnot. I mean, obviously we can't do a moat. But the question also is, what are you buffering from? Cut through traffic? Are you buffering the view of something so big? Those are two different things. So if you want to prevent people from walking from that district into the single family home, then I guess we can continue doing what we're doing with the gates and the fences.
Right.
If you're looking to block out the view of what that is, that's a whole different.
Right, yeah, I mean, right now, we're not blocking, the people on Oakwood are not, even though there was a 150-foot setback for the Wyndham Garden, where the pilot house is, they could still see it, right? I'm not suggesting that we have to buffer it from view. But I can tell you that all of those residents were happy that we were able to do the street closures and have the fencing that we put also include the sidewalks, because I think that it was just inviting people from hotels. It tends to be more transient to just walk right into their, I mean, I had residents telling me that like people just went into my driveway and started playing on my basketball court, right? So they were very happy that we isolated them by making the buffers more robust. I just, and again, it was just an idea, and I'm not trying to stifle the creativity of the ideas. That's what this whole process is, right? We're coming up with ideas. But when we talk about expanding the zones and expanding the zones to include those that half blocks that are south of Oakwood that have single family residential, and obviously that would have to be done, like I feel like that is just and until I see it differently, I feel like that's like a bus stop too far for me, right? I feel like there's plenty of things that we can do in terms of streamlining processes, in terms of like cleaning up the zoning that in order to encourage and making it easier for development to come in. And I think that there's a lot of things that we can do. And obviously, I think that the biggest thing, which is why it was left for last in the presentation, is tackling how that charter amendment that restricts the height of multifamily, particularly in that southeast corner, we feel that that's a market that we can tap into. I think everybody agreed with that. So sorry that I keep being repetitive. I know that that's going to be an inflection point that we should consider because they will make us consider it.
You also, and I know not to belabor the point, you also have to consider, I mean, right now we're thinking buffer from what's there right now. Yeah, obviously everybody wants a buffer from what's there right now. But what we're envisioning is an activated place where people may want to walk from their house over there and go to a restaurant, go hang out, do something that they can't do now. And so you think about it that way as well.
Well, buffers can be lifted in an ideal scenario, right?
You're right.
I think the
Buffers can
buffer
be-
is addressing a situation. I totally get it. And it's an unfortunate situation. Who's to say 20 years from now,
You can lift the buffer.
we can lift the buffer because the situation has gotten much better?
And that's my whole, the goal is to make everything much better into the future. Right now, in order for us to, we'll provide the buffers, we'll do whatever we can, but maybe in the future, I'm envisioning a community, an area where people are going to want to walk to.
Ask the people who live right there on East Drive, which are those motels that bring us one of the biggest crimes to our area. What do they think about that community? What do they want to see? Leave it the same or improve it? Those people right there on East Drive literally abut one of our worst areas. Okay, keep it the same. So they don't want anything. But they don't want the motel either.
But to be clear, there will be buffers. We will, do whatever we can with the space that's available, right?
Sure.
And also you can architecturally require, for lack of a better term, aesthetically pleasing aspects, so people can see something nice instead of a stark wall or whatever.
I also think, aside from the buffer serving that purpose, giving distance away from what could potentially be there, even if it's not multifamily, hotels, you're giving a bigger buffer, but you're also helping that resident whose house has been affected markedly. Their values have been adversely affected already. Now they become a commercial property because the developer has to require that to have the extra buffer. Actually, might create a better value than they have right now.
All I'm saying is that
You got a buffer, a bigger buffer.
the idea of expanding the zone 2, which is again, I believe it's Lee Drive East along there, that expanding the zone, yes, that would make it easier for developers to be able to do more meaningful things and better things, but that's not going to all happen in one fell swoop. And and in the meantime, again, I just feel like that's an encroachment into single family residential. I don't feel that we should be doing that. I feel like we should try to, you know, promote revitalization in the areas that we do have. But again, we're going to hear from residents. So.
And by the way, I just want to interject because I keep kind of hearing that, I'm proposing to expand that there's an idea that I put, and I said several times
Right.
that this is not something that I'm even thinking would be done in this process necessarily.
Sure.
But, there are evolutions that happen in situations like this. You already have some single-family homes that were converted to offices by virtue of their proximity to those uses. And that is not to say that in 10 years or 20 years, others will not be desiring to do that too. So,
But where that has happened, it's been in streets where there's no street closure.
it could still happen. There could be demand. Somebody could be looking to buy. Somebody could be looking to sell, is all I'm saying. I'm not suggesting that that's something that happens today, but it is an idea that, it was for like a potential future. So I just want to make it clear that I wasn't suggesting that you go and
Right, no,
expand that.
I get it.
I just want to make it very clear
Right.
because, you've said it a number of times, and I think that people are going to misinterpret that is being suggested today.
Right. Well, it was suggested, right?
It was suggested, but not today.
No, I know, but it was suggested as an idea, and
Right.
I feel that if I don't come out strongly, I don't think the point of tonight was just to hear ideas and not opine, and then let the residents hear the ideas and them to be able to opine. Because it was suggested, I want to make sure that people at least understand where I stand on it. This isn't anything new. I think that this is something we've discussed here on the dais before. Because it was an idea, and I'm not trying to, shoot anything down. I'm just, I'm projecting what I think reactions will be to that particular idea. I think that residents want to know where we stand on it. And I think that would be helpful going into them being able to give us feedback so that they just don't think that everything that was proposed as an idea is necessarily on equal footing with every other idea.
The other thing I want to make sure that is understood, if anybody's watching, is that nowhere in this presentation is it suggested that first, street closures be lifted, or second, that there not be buffers between
Right.
incompatible uses.
Right.
Because that's been said several times also as if it's something that was suggested.
Yeah, I mean, if I suggested that, I did that. What I mean is that I feel like we should be, as we make these plans, we should see how we can isolate the unintended impacts, isolate single-family residential from the unintended impacts of the kind of revitalization efforts that we are proposing. I think that should guide
That's
us.
the whole point.
Yep.
So zone 3, zone 2,
What does that
zone
mean?
1.
What is that?
That way it was like, well, zone 3 is already, we got some, feedback. Zone 2, we have feedback. Do we want to talk about zone 1?
Well, I mean,
Talking about zones, I think it's important that we keep the zones, especially going into the conversation with the residents, as just zones, because once we start putting names on it, I think we're going to mislead the public, and, they're going to think that we already have ideas. So perception is important.
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, already
Just
came
an
here
idea.
today with names, and the presentation obviously is public. Next week, we're coming to the public with the opportunity to provide input. If you want me to take the names out, I can do that, certainly. But I think that the characterization is important because that's what provides the foundation for the differences in the way that we approach the zoning.
yeah. And I think that that's the point, right? The whole point, this was all one district. The whole point of making these different zones is so that we can honor different characters in these different zones, rather than treat it all as one monolithic zone. If you notice there on the map, all along Fairway Drive, the idea of a long-term plan of, slowly promoting people, as you said, Sylvia, turning our back on 36th Street and having the walkability and everything be all along Fairway and promote. You've got hotels to the north of you. You got some multifamily providing there, but notice the absence there in most of that zone of single-family residential. You see, right, like that. To me,
Yeah, that's what I said. That's the segment that does
Yeah.
not have any
the-
adjacency.
I don't want to make it as simplistic as and yes, right? What I'm saying is that like that is an idea that I think is something, I think all these ideas are worth considering, right? Like my only, listen, I can promise you that the feedback that we get, right, and the most boisterous and loudest feedback is going to be the negative feedback. People are going to want to get up off of their couch to come and complain, not to tell us what a great job we're doing in terms of thinking about these ideas. I'm just predicting what the rub is going to be and what people are going to be most boisterously against. And again, it's around buffers. I think that we've made it clear. If it was a drinking game, every time we say the word buffer, we all take a shot. I think that it would, right? But I think that we've said it. I'm glad that we said it so many times because I want people to understand that these are all just ideas, but we want to be very mindful of protecting and preserving the people that came to Miami Springs to have single-family residentials where it's not cookie-cutter homes, where it's one on top of the other, where they have, if single-family residential is something that is hard to find increasingly in Miami, I think it's something that to be preserved and I think that people should know that we all feel like isolating single-family residential from some of the unintended consequences of these initiatives that we have to promote revitalization. This effort is at the front of our mind. I think that they would be happy to hear that we have those concerns in mind.
On a separate note, we've talked a lot about what's above ground. How are we gonna plan for infrastructure underground? Because I imagine that, as these buildings go up, it's going to be harder to get all these pipes in there and whatnot. And I know it's something that the senator has talked to me about as well. And he says that he's happy to help us with funding as we plan for this.
Yeah, I mean, the infrastructure side of it is
Right, I mean.
part of it.
It certainly, I think that the city needs to be planning for whatever improvements of the infrastructure. I mean, like, that's certainly an incentive to a developer that is looking to invest, because the less that they have to contribute themselves, the better they are, right? On the flip side is that through this process that we've talked about, of sort of memorializing a community benefits program package, that developers should be contributing to the improvement of the infrastructure that they're going to be impacting. So I think that Miami Springs probably falls sort of in between those two extremes, and you have to decide which one you're going to go. And what I mean by that is that I've been doing this in communities that have been desperate for investment, and others that kind of can say, nah, and where there has been the desperation, those communities choose to make the investment proactively so that they can say to developers, come, we have it ready, it's ready. And then there's the other side where you force the developer to do all the work, all the legwork on that. So, I think that perhaps because of the lack of activity over a long time, this district may fall somewhere in between, that the city needs to be looking to put some investment into it, but at the same time, as development comes in, hopefully, that everybody contributes their fair share. So,
I think in the last 10, 15 years, you drive anywhere in South Florida, and you're going to say, when did that building go up? I see it everywhere. Just a quick example, my parents used to rent a warehouse off of Burr Road and 75th Avenue. Now that they've pushed the art galleries out and they sold that, they're going to build apartment buildings.
yes.
We can learn from a lot of mistakes out there. But I think we're at a good moment in the city. We've hesitated long enough. I think we're at a good moment to decide what we want to see and what we want to be, because the rest of South Florida has maybe overdeveloped in certain areas. So we can control our destiny here.
You have a window, I think, where you can decide what this looks like. And there's nothing to say that there's a wrong answer. If the community says, we don't want any change, we don't want any development, that's your choice as a community. You can say that.
Of course.
And you put the zoning in place in a way you already have to prevent it from happening. And that's that. And you live with the consequences.
Right.
And you figure out another way to get to the things that you need,
Look, I think what's important, it's something that's come up before here on the dais, right? And we got a lot of historians here in the city of Miami Springs. When the 25-foot wooden cutout of Jack Tiger Tail, the Seminole Indian, was on Okeechobee Road, like that, the bridge into Miami Springs, that was the entrance. That was the forward-facing part of Miami Springs. That was the entrance. That was our central, that was the entrance. That has now changed. The entrance now to Miami Springs, and I feel like everybody probably agrees that we need to do something. That southeast corner of Miami Springs is really now the forward-facing part of our city. And we need to do something about it. And I think that most people that you talk to, if you told them that the infill development that's necessary includes being, allowing for a multifamily residential, and I think that most people even agree that we should do something to have an exemption from the height restriction there. We need to find the right slot there, the right mixture, and just be mindful of all these things. I don't think that anybody's going to be against our intent is to try to find a way to revitalize that area. And as long as we listen to everybody, and hey, at the end of the day, that charter restriction would have to be voted on by the residents of Miami Springs, right? I would caution us from trying to bite off more than we could chew, or try to hit the 5-run, 6-run home run in one swing. I feel that we should use a scalpel and be very mindful of all of these concerns that residents have. And I think that we could do something that can move us along. Like we don't have to get to the final, the end game solution. We need to move things forward. I think we've learned a lot from the last 10 to 15 years about what the consequences of what we have been restricting and allowing. And I think that that's important for us to have this conversation. And I think the fact that we're here debating what is palatable to people and what people think and want is important. We're going to have an opportunity for people to chime in, and then we'll have a debate where we'll repeat all of these things again. So again, not trying to put a stick in the spokes. I'm just being clear so that people understand we are just brainstorming here. But I want people to understand that we are mindful of what the unintended consequences must be. So I'm happy that we're having these conversations. I think they will appreciate that we're having these conversations, and we'll be able to get their input, and that will inform our decisions. That we're still a ways away from making decisions. And at the end of the day, our decisions will have to be approved by the residents of Miami Springs. And so I think we're on the right track.
Through the chair.
Uh-huh.
Sylvia, I don't think you need to excuse yourself of your your initial assessment to the area.
I'm not,
You
I'm
call
not
it the
excusing
way,
it. I'm
call it the
defending-
way it
I'm
is.
actually
No, but
defending
call
it.
it the way it is. This is the gateway, like our mayor just said, to this city. What is it you want? It's disconnected from the community, they say, because they don't want to be part of that area. But yet you're connected. For not doing anything, they're connected in a negative way. So here we are now dictating what you want to see, but then the market doesn't tell you that that's what it's feasible or not. So here we're going back to dictating this whole area that this is what we want to see. Well, what you want to see is not market. Do you want to change or you don't want to change? If you don't want to do anything about that area,
And that is okay,
that is
too.
fine,
That
too.
is okay, too.
We'll
I mean,
live
we've-
with
We've
it.
been in that situation before, and if the community says, we don't want anything. But, I think that it needs to be understood that if nothing happens, then nothing happens, right?
Correct.
And so, that is a valid answer. That's definitely a valid answer. I just don't want, for myself as a professional planner, 15 years from now, somebody to come and say, well, they made these changes to the zoning and nothing happened.
Right.
And mind you, because as far as I know, the 2011 changes, CGA was working for the city on those.
Right.
And I will bet you anything that, they made bolder suggestions that were cut back, to accommodate. Yes?
definitely.
And Sylvia, I would say that you said that you read something where people mentioned that it seemed like the presentation that you made, where you made the assessment of the current situation along there, that it emphasized the negative. I live there, drive down 36th Street. That's my neighborhood. When I see patrons of the hotel, when I see hotel guests walking along 36th Street to get to, they're walking somewhere because they're hotel residents. Like, I wouldn't want to walk with my family down those sidewalks on 36th Street. I wouldn't.
Dangerous.
And
it
we
feels
need
in
to-
hospital. And dangerous, I
Right.
mean, like from the traffic, not
Right.
necessarily, like
Right.
it's just inhospitable.
Right,
know?
right. So these things are all true at the same time, right? We want to do something about that. I think that the residents want us to do something about that. I'm undeterred by somebody who thinks that we're focusing on the negative, like something has to be done. It's just a balance between, doing something to help that and preserving the things that we feel like we want to preserve.
Of course. Of course.
Through the chair. So I think that we're all up here in part because of, changes coming to 36th Street. That's what a lot of us ran on, bringing change to 36th Street. So right now, obviously, we can't control what that change is, and that's what we're going to talk to the residents about. But what we can start working on, and I know I'm repeating myself as to what I said earlier, is the infrastructure, because the change is going to come one way or another, whether it's with this council or the next council. Everybody keeps running on that same topic, so the residents want it. But if we built on top of all these streets and these new buildings, and then our infrastructure, it's old and decrepit, I think that will be a problem later on. 20, 30 years go past us, and then we're going under and we're having the same issue that we had on Oakwood. So I think we should start having the conversation about how we could start working on that.
Agree?
That's why we got impact fees coming, hopefully soon, right?
I know
Yeah,
Brian
and,
Avila had mentioned
It is
that.
true. That's something I did not mention in my presentation at all. And I thought about it and I didn't put it in there. I forgot, that the issue of impact fees is something that you need to be thinking about, because if redevelopment does happen, you need to have that in place as a tool to recoup.
No, but we've been working on it.
I know you are.
Thank you, Sylvia.
I'd like to say, Sylvia, thank you. I know that you were given some very general direction and you come to us with a bunch of ideas. I'm sure you assumed that 100% of your ideas were not going to be approved. Like you proposed a lot more than what you think would be approved just because you're giving us a suite of options. And when I say us, I mean the city.
I
So
just want people to think about things that they have never thought about before, you know? And, you know, some of those, maybe they won't like them, but, you know, these are potential solutions to problems, to issues, to challenges. If we don't want to tackle those at this time or in this manner, that is okay. But, you know, have we ever thought about expanding the district in this direction or in that other direction or turning your back around? You know, none of those things perhaps has been discussed before.
right.
And I just want to put those ideas out there so that, and maybe somebody comes back and say, well, you know what, there's something to that, but what about if we did it this other way?
Right.
So, you know, it's just a conversation starter.
Right.
That's,
And I appreciate it. I want to say, like, you did a phenomenal job, and thank you. And I'm sorry if we made it feel like the Gong Show, or we call it Chacal from Salvo Gigante, and get you out of here. I don't mean to like just completely dismiss an idea. We are glad that you came up with all these ideas. I think that they're all worth consideration. They're all worth the spirited debate. They make the ultimate decision better. So I appreciate your efforts. We want to have things that we say, hey, that to me that's a little too far, right? If you're not pushing it to that point, then where do we find the boundary of what is the best decision? So that is to be expected. It's not that everything that you're proposing or that was mentioned tonight is a plan that's already coming down the works that people have to. This is just brainstorming. It's meant to be. It's meant to be that. It's meant to push the envelope of what the ideas are so that we could find the happy median. So I am very, very pleased with what you came up with. Thank you. Any other comments?
Same thing. Thank you.
Okay, so then, once again, the public meeting will be at the Senior Center on Monday, the 25th, starting at 6:30, correct? Okay, so we will promote that for the city, for residents to be able to come and participate and learn more and share their ideas and feedback. All right. If there are no further comments, I don't need to look at the agenda. We got nothing else. So then this meeting is adjourned at 9:24. Thank you. Hey. JC, before you leave.
There's a barrier